Is anyone not ready? Okay, first advantage, NATO-Russia. European security arrangement is deteriorating now. Nuclear ambiguity is the major driver. Change in U.S. policy is profoundly needed, down in 17. Conflict in Europe could rapidly escalate into nuclear conflagration. Limited use challenges Cold War deterrence thinking. Relations between U.S. and Russia have deteriorated. Russian willingness to engage and reliance on nuclear weapons predate President Trump's inauguration. His response has aggravated relations with European allies and Russia alike. Changing U.S. nuclear weapons policy will profoundly affect NATO's nuclear weapons policy and will have implications for the security of European allies and Russia. And Russian nuclear weapons on high alert, Co in 17. Here's the status of American-Russian nuclear weapons, an accident waiting to happen. And fear of first use causes Russia to keep nuclear weapons launched on high trigger alert. Risk accidental launch, UCS-15. During the Cold War, military strategies feared a first strike. Countries kept on high alert. Important for deterring a first strike. Warning systems are perfect, creating miscalc. During the Cold War, leaders believe benefits outweigh risk. Does not make sense today. Risk is not theoretical. Human technical errors significantly increase possibility of nuclear use. Close calls clearly demonstrate the ongoing risk of high trigger alert. Consequences are too devastating to simply maintain the status quo and for continued good luck. Leaders more likely to interpret ambiguous warning as real. Taking missiles off high trigger alert would eliminate the risk of mistaken launch based on erroneous or misinterpreted warning. U.S. decision encouraged Russia to reciprocate. And Russian nuclear arsenals would wipe out the world. Mass 12. Russia maintains an arsenal of active and inactive warheads on high trigger alert. Russia's early warning systems fallen into disrepair. The likelihood of miscalc increases. Russia's high risk because of warheads under weakened security arrangements. And breakdown of nuclear trust hurts arms control process globally. Only diplomacy solves war because new technology makes nuclear deterrence useless, down in 17. Violation lead to breakdown of treaty and confidence, worsen relations with Russia, and contribute to nuclear arms race. Cheated violations spark a new international crisis, harming European security, lead to crisis between Europe and U.S. Exacerbate trade disputes and make non-prolif more difficult. Deterrence complicated by emerging weapon system, making nuclear weapons appear less reliable as a strategic deterrent. And contradictory 2018 NPR crushes cohesion with our European allies. NFU checks miscalc and NATO-Russia war. No alt causes to nuclear weapons, down in 17. Underpinned by questioning of U.S. commitments to global non-prolif result in pushback and end up weakening cohesion of alliance. Cooperation within NATO that signals deterrence posture inseparable from extended deterrence. Inseparable from U.S. alliance credibility. Extended deterrence on NATO, but U.S. In response to signaling Russia assume the worst, too reluctant to strategic competition, clear NATO and U.S. signaling specifically on nuclear declaratory policy could help improve relations. Allies could do more to make explicit the circumstances in which NATO would sanction nuclear use. And Trump's NPR damages relations in Europe. Modernization increases likelihood of war, down in 18. Gives opportunities to use nuclear weapons in a wider set of conflict scenarios. U.S. mimic Russian policy. Galileo SLBM was used to respond to Russian attack. The launching submarine would have to surface, inviting response to prevent further launches. U.S. pursuit of new nuclear weapons worsen tensions with Russia. And plan solves. First use causes Russia to keep its nuclear weapons on high trigger alert. NFU allows them to relax their posture and keep fingers off the nuclear trigger. Kalina 16. No longer worth the risk. Exacerbates mutual fears of surprise attack. Pressure others to keep their arsenals on high alert, increasing risk of unintended nuclear war. Reassure Russia, reduce miscalc. And NFU de-escalates Russian tension. Co in 16. Vital political struggle to end new Cold War now underway. Want to retrieve rapprochement instead of new Cold War. Adoption of NFU doctrine by Washington and Moscow considerably reduce the growing risk of nuclear war. Plan. The United States Congress should prohibit the ability of the President of the United States to conduct first-use nuclear strikes against a country or organization that has not attacked the United States or its allies with nuclear weapons. Next advantage, China mod. China is currently modernizing its forces to be able to challenge U.S. nuclear dominance, Johnson 18. China's nuclear posture synthesized into force structures designed to deter both conventional and nuclear wars. When the offensive defensive balance is not distinguishable, security dilemma is intense. Recent innovations expedite emerging generation of missiles across triad. Enhanced ICBM nuclear mobile launchers and MIRVs, tested it to numerous complicated task of U.S. missile defense intercepts where China operates SSBMs, potential nuclear war for major upgrades to command control communications, system-based HK-6K, developing nuclear-capable cruise missiles, recent advances in hypersonic blue sky technology, penetrate U.S. defense systems, China is willing to accept qualitative inferiority. And China modernization driven purely by aggressive U.S. nuclear posture, changes in it are closely monitored. Hain 16. A larger problem, American nuclear strategy shift, increased possibility of preemptive nuclear strike, distrust of U.S. intent, predates precedent of America displaying unilateral determination. Talk seems to be awareness of U.S. intent, development of nuclear weapons and assurance policy against U.S. intervention. China ceases changing as a result. U.S. intervention becomes more likely as U.S. adopts a more aggressive strategy. U.S. nuclear strategy is #1 factor influencing China's nuclear buildup and diversification. China's taken enhancement of counterattack capabilities, force structure and effectiveness of missiles, improving capability of missiles, building force sophistication, equipping itself to counter enemy adopted maximum deterrence. And continued China modernization props built by India and Pakistan leads to regional instability. NFU solves because it eliminates the driver of modernization, Chinese vulnerability. Haines 18. Unlike the solves the treaty's failure to address expanding and modernizing Chinese nuclear arsenal, China must have enough nuclear weapons to use that of serious concern. China has acquired increasingly sophisticated weapons. Evidence indicates it intends to accelerate nuclear buildup. Such developments not lost on stages in the region. India keeps eye on China's developments, and Pakistan watches India. Presents real possibility of cascading effect where Chinese buildup prompts buildup by India, which prompts Pakistan. Regional instability run counter to U.S. security interests. A more practical approach is in order. U.S. officials argue hard capabilities and peace disarmament, but China needs reassurance the U.S. will not employ strategic nuclear weapons. Want knowledge of U.S. nuclear intent? Why China wants the U.S. to sign NFU. And prolif leads to escalation of brinkship. Every new nuclear weapon state increases risk of nuclear war. Code 14. Nuclear proliferation contributes to risk of nuclear war, even in a situation of mad. Leaders operate under competing pressures, delegating nuclear arms authority to low-level commanders to purposely increase risk of nuclear war in an attempt to force less resolved opponents to back down. And NFU solves Chinese hypersonics, inevitable because of U.S. offensive pressure ball is 17. In China, hypersonic weapons are intended to overcome small size of its nuclear arsenal, even as the U.S.'s non-declaration of NFU policy continues to be a point of concern. China's developments in the context of A280 strategy. Such a capability to penetrate air missile defense systems would also enhance China's regional power production capability, allowing the expansion of its power production beyond its immediate periphery. On its solvency, Congress can legally constrain the president for no first use, but to maximum 18. The proposed requirements are within Congress' authority. The Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war and include the power to place limits on when the president may resort to nuclear first use, requiring additional checks for first use to serve as a hedge against an impetuous commander lurching into catastrophe. The founders put a high premium on checks and balances, and Congress has the authority to declare no first use legislation. Level 8. The accepted understanding that the president has exclusive authority over battlefield operations and Congress cannot participate as a matter of constitutional logic. That proposition is untenable. On numerous occasions, Congress has enacted legislation that interfered with the president's authority over operations. The first grant Congress the powers to provide rules for the armed forces. Congress can say the Army shall not be going with nuclear weapons, or it shall have nuclear weapons, but only use them in response to a nuclear attack. Congress has said it will be an army that does not use ground troops in a particular conflict. These restrictions effectively say, we created this army, not that one. And air aft, deterrence must be right 100% of the time. Only 1% chance of failure is extinction, factor 17. Failure to demonstrate tangible progress coincided with heightened anxieties about rising nuclear threats. Geopolitical tensions have risen. Deterrence must work every single time. For nuclear Armageddon, deterrence needs to break down only once. This is 100% guarantee is an impossibly high bar. Trump increased global anxiety about world peace being held hostage by their fingers. Trump concentrated minds around the world on nuclear risk. World survived risk going over the brink with at least 2 leaders. Can dramatically increase speed and scope of his nuclear programs. Trump discarded Reagan's warning that nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. Most dislike and deterrence arrogant, intolerant, and even dangerous. And U.S. NFU policy doesn't link to deterrence or allied proliferation D8 and prevents multiple short-term scenarios for nuclear war. Federal Wolf Saw 18. Lack of NFU increased prospects for nuclear conflict. Trump's rejection of norms is increasing risk that nuclear weapons will be used. The situation on Korean Peninsula versus asymmetry miscalculated first use due to reliance on ambiguity. As the world's sole conventional military superpower, the U.S. does not need nuclear weapons to deter non-nuclear threats. U.S. nuclear posture under Trump widened a growing system of global non-proliferation disarmament. The U.S. can reduce role of nuclear weapons and maintaining security, an important step toward reinforcing deterrent relationships. There is no need to threaten to use nuclear weapons to deter or respond to any plausible conventional attack from a nuclear-armed adversary. If the threat to use nuclear weapons first is not necessary, it is less than credible. Making incredible threats weakens the credibility of other commitments. The commitment will not be undermined in any way by NFU because the U.S. would use nuclear weapons only after an adversary already used. Extended deterrence uses nuclear capability to deter non-nuclear or conventional attacks. This form of extended deterrence is much less credible. The U.S. would be threatening to start a nuclear war with the country that has the capacity to retaliate. It is far from clear that threatening to use nuclear weapons in response to biological attack would be credible. In the case of states pursuing biological weapons, appears to be calculation as with nuclear weapons. The conventional security imbalance leads states to counter America's conventional capability. Threatening nuclear weapons use does not address the underlying driver for prolif. Nuclear response is not likely to be effective or necessary, and thus is unlikely to be deterrent. The U.S. nuclear arsenal is an effective deterrent against such an attack. America has over 4,000 nuclear weapons in its stockpile. This aspect of the nuclear umbrella would not be diminished if the U.S. adopted NFU. U.S. threats to use nuclear weapons or retaliation for nuclear attacks on Japan are highly credible because Japan is a close ally. U.S. opposition to NFU weakens non-prolif. NFU would strengthen non-prolif efforts. A U.S. nuclear response to a nuclear attack by North Korea on Japan would not be affected by NFU. Nuclear weapons are not needed to destroy the North Korean base from which these attacks are being launched. If the U.S. and Japan do not believe it would make sense to use nuclear weapons first, the threat to do so would not be a credible deterrent to non-nuclear aggression by North Korea. Japan does not imagine the U.S. would actually use nuclear weapons to defend Japanese claims to uninhabited pieces of rock. If the U.S. and Japan believe there is no meaningful use for nuclear weapons in such a conflict, then how can the threat to use nuclear weapons be credible? If the threat is not credible, it cannot be an effective deterrent. Anything that would be interpreted as a direct commitment to make a nuclear threat in response to anything but the use of nuclear weapons create a commitment trap. In these cases, the U.S. and Japan may feel compelled to follow through with the nuclear response, even if it might trigger a catastrophic avoidable response. Failing to respond could expose past commitments to use nuclear weapons as a bluff and call into question the credibility of the U.S. Suggesting the U.S. might want or need to use nuclear weapons first in response to a conventional or some other non-nuclear threat undermines the credibility of our commitment to nuclear retaliation. The threat from the U.S. is the conventional superior to use nuclear weapons calls into question U.S. conventional capabilities. Full confidence in those would eliminate the need to use nuclear weapons in response to anything but a nuclear attack. I am ready for cross-X.
Okay, your Federer and Wolfcell evidence specifies a commitment trap, but for example, in 2011, Obama drew the red line in Syria, said that we will use forces. Nothing happened, no repercussions, no impact. Why?
Because he drew a red line and said this is exactly
and didn't
what
follow through, right? Created the commitment trap, nothing happened. So what's the impact?
The impact is that we lose credibility on the
Okay, like what? That's an internal. Like, what is the impact? Like, what does that matter? Why do I care?
Because U.S. credibility is important. It means that if we make promises to other countries and we've already proven not to be...
Okay, sure, that's fine. You want to talk about your first advantage that relies on miscalc. A lot of your evidence is pretty old, talks about how important miscalc is, some from 2016, etc. Where's the miscalc? Like, a lot of it's very urgent, right?
So now tensions are higher than they've ever been before. As you can see with like the Russia investigation and stuff between the US and Russia and with NATO, tensions are really high. So what that means is that miscalc is more likely now than it has ever been. And miscalculation only has to happen once to end the human race. So it's important to have this plan to prevent that from happening.
So, but your evidence, like apparently the Union of Concerned Scientists in 2015 think that like miscalc is going to happen tomorrow. It's been 4 years. Why should any of us care?
We should care because it only has to happen once to wipe out the entire human race. And tensions are higher now than they were in 2015.
Sure. Okay, China mod. In what world are countries not modernizing? Like, why does NFU stop modernization or tech developments?
Sure, right now China is modernizing because they're afraid of our AFU policy. China doesn't know where the US stands on anything.
When did they start modernizing though? Like, why do they have nukes? Like, isn't modernization just like a thing that countries do?
China started modernizing out of fear of the US.
How do you know that though?
They're modernizing their nuclear weapons, not just like any technology in the world. It's specifically they're modernizing nuclear weapons.
Why isn't that because of deterrence? Why isn't that because they buy into the idea of mutually assured destruction?
No, it's out of fear of our AFU policy. That's our Johnson 18, Carter 16.
Why? What's the warrant? I know Johnson thinks that, but why does he think that?
Because China started building up hypersonic weapons as a result of our ambiguous first use policy. China doesn't want to get left in the dust, and China doesn't want to get hurt if the U.S. is going to come at them.
Okay. I want to talk about your Indo-Pak scenario. India and Pakistan have literally been fighting, and both sides are trying to get out of this and are literally like trying to de-escalate right now. So why does this not just literally take out the entire thesis of your affirmative that people just escalate for no reason?
It's not that they escalate; it's that they proliferate because China proliferates, and then India tries to keep up with China, and then Pakistan tries to keep up with India.
They've had nukes, right? Like
it's
during the Kargil War in the
weapons,
90s, they literally had nukes and were like talking about nuking each other, and nothing happened. Now they're not even saying we're going to nuke each other. Now they're just like, whatever, we're chill. So how is it unique? That's fine.
You get him?
It's that.
Okay. Cool. How many?
4 off, and then piece of over 1 AC.
What time the snow's supposed to knock off?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I saw it was supposed to end at like 4 a.m.
I appreciate you for using my call.
Like I was surprised when I woke up because like I thought there would be more snow down.
Oh wait, that was there.
Yeah, it was only like a couple inches on the ground, and then it was snowing hard. I was like, weird.
You said case in order.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good.
Wait, what's the order?
4 off, and then case in the order that 1 AC.
So it's NATO, Russia, China, and then Salt Lake.
You think this is going to stop at noon?
Noon.
Air quality is moderate.
Quality moderate. Sorry.
You guys good? First off, interview undercuts allied assurances cost per look. That's pain. And 16. Russia to be pursuing expansion policies. Russia is forcibly changing borders and issuing nuclear threats. China is expanding against allies, militarizing SPSL. U.S. allies face unprecedented threats. U.S. should not reduce resources. China must cover their expansions rise by adopting NFU would mean the U.S. would no longer reassure allies with nuclear umbrella, pulling down the umbrella would compel allies to consider acquiring nuclear weapons, would include South Korea and Japan. No nuclear proliferation and the inevitable consequence of NFU. It would be unsettling. NFU would be unsettling to allies and nuclear war. That's faith in 9. Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and others might decide security requires them to acquire nukes. This would reach a tipping point with cascading proliferation. Obama's policies evacuate the way friends and after review determined the wrong policies cause states to lose confidence and to seek nukes. The dangerous nuclear go substantially. It might be one of the costliest mistakes ever. And the next off. The executive branch of the United States should issue an executive order to declare no first use strike policy. The president should publicly endorse the plan through speeches and statements. The OLC should written forward interpretation supporting the plan. The attorney general should endorse this opinion, and the executive branch should comply. Yes, sir, solves, and the speech plan makes it credible. That's Hawkins in 17. With respect to NWU, executive action is an option for use for to utilize the power of the president to implement executive action. Reverse executive action sermons are a viable source of policy implementation strategies. The Trump has been shown to rely heavily on a variety of sermons, whether it's reiterate his policy goals. Speeches could be used to relay information and influencing people through transfer to achieve a policy result. On to the next off. The plan takes executive power to direct military offsets, seeing in 18. Enumeration of specific military powers does not apply. Congress has a plenary directive directive authority over operations. The part of direct military is the president's alone. Military matters are exclusive province of the commander-in-chief, the most prominent directing operations, and a few legislative versions could have been inferential operational authority by president in conflict, even if it was non-nuclear, by denying full operational control of the arsenal. Independently, restrictions spill over to direct war powers. That's Weba in 17. This term will recognize the president's delegate, plenary, and executive power when it comes to foreign affairs. Questions about presidential authority crop up in our conflict. Power by president sets up a president congressional inaction, create expectations for the output itself. The history of how presidents exercise power is critical to understand unbroken executive practice. And never before questioned maybe a gloss on executive power. The more the president does, the more the president gets away with. Foreign policy meddling goes nuclear. That's Zeisberg in 4. Congress have have no role in reviewing the executive use of war powers. Would put the presidency as straitjacket. Authority of the president is crucial in foreign policy. Executive can fight with their will and mobilize resources with the speed superior to any other branch. Wars can develop quickly. States have the power to track forces almost instantly. The nuclear age deterrence from cars. A single person's authorization would collapse deterrence, making preemptive strikes likely for Congress to have any role in it. Would be undermined the strength that the executive requires. On to the next off. Technical policy fixes of nuclear security causes neoliberal reconfiguration of the political locks and dominant power relations. That's Gilbert in 12. Technical expertise and security describes and foreign threats. The other is that threat is specified in spatial terms and having somewhere, so threatening others constructed through state capitalism and spatialized knowledge of the other. The expansion of technical expertise serves to depoliticize the issues that take place in political discussion with expert discourse by justifying existing technical fixes and by creating ever-present threats. Critical geopolitics and to interrogate the logics that guide policy control over nuclear weapons to a specific kind of political work. They naturalize the state as the proper users of violent technologies. The hopeful view of the technology bolsters and ignores incredible structural and state violence. And the alternative is to reject the affirmative as an intellectual refusal of capitalist ideology. That's Johnson in 4. Those important factors of negativity, the critical struggle, the effort to carry intellectual conservation from capitalist ideology and open the stakes for alternatives to capitalism may exist in the conditions of subjects internally believing that capitalism's lifeblood is a belief in others, a belief in socio-political force. Capitalism's vulnerability is the source of its strength. Capitalists disavow believing capitalism makes highly unlikely people can be persuaded to stop believing and start thinking. On to case, Russia. Plan kills Russia deterrence and forefronts Russian aggressions. That's Chang in 16. American partners are having difficulty deterring aggressors may need their destructive weaponry to maintain stability. China is grabbing the SES. Moscow is on the marches. NATO is not capable of defending politics. Across multiple games, the longest has taken Russian forces 60 hours. The West is how it needs to get the aggressors. They can be destroyed by first strike. Nuclear threats prevent conventional attacks. Soviet tanks could have rolled across Europe, but they never did. Putin is bulking up on forces on this side of the border, planning to deploy 3 new divisions. Near Poland and the Baltics is made having the best moment to adopt. And if you create an experiment on what deters weapons that will look at an instrument and having avoided global war. War with Russia would not take a militia, but this would be a nuclear thing. The past absence no president has dared change nuclear strategy. And Baltics goes nuclear. That's Majum Dar in 18. A war with Russia would go nuclear between NATO and Russia. Nuclear weapons would come into play. The conflict were going poorly for Moscow. If Russia faced a defeat, Moscow might resort to nuclear weapons. The end of a NATO counteroffensive would leave NATO with limited counteroffensive, or concede counteroffensive would be probable conventional forces would be destroyed. Russia might counter with nuclear weapons. And launch on warning won't lead to miscalc. That's Killer in 17. NCCS has been designed with resilience, redundancy, survivability to ensure the adversary cannot neutralize the turn by attacking any of its elements, disconnecting the present even in distressing scenarios. These enhanced deterrence crisis abilities, sensitive communications are certified, tested, and exercise validated performance factors, prevent unauthorized use of smaller bombers, no longer load bombers and tankers, no longer loaded missiles aimed at open ocean, and decision time is longer, and 0 chance of arms control revival, and if you won't solve. That's Kuhn in 18. Western Russia with an NGRNU are the risk of a complete breakdown of bilateral arms control, leadership control, concerned with the U.S. missile defense, Russia paranoid and momentum when Washington withdrew from the ABM. Russia is a firm believer in nuclear deterrence. Russia views a nuke as a compensatory element against backdrop of power imbalance vis-a-vis Washington and NPR allies concerned about imbalances in Eastern Europe. Russia doctrine to escalate, give Moscow a decisive advantage in the regional conflict. Russia's annexation of Crimea and interference in 2016 led NATO to increasingly see Russia's survival of poor communication misinterpretations. What could happen in an acute military crisis for a long time? INF cornerstone of your security. Congress is moving forward with INF arms control, last hopes, and new start limits the treaty system. Trump rejects extension achievement of Obama. Russia indirectly accused the U.S. of violating the treaty. What's missing is political will and respect. It's a question of resolve, not capability. Russia doesn't think we'll use nuclear weapons because the Baltics are strategically irrelevant to the U.S., not because we are committed enough to nuclear weapons. That's Harry's in 18. The toughest problem the U.S. faces political planners worry about limited because they feel limited war because they feel the West does not risk war with Russia to defend Eastern allies. And miscalculation not true. No usually lose phenomenon. That's Kronig in 18. Ignores the fact that the superior state remains a healthy ability to retaliate. Inferior state would intentionally launch against a state secure second strike would be guaranteed to suffer devastating nuclear retaliation given a situation of inferiority. This would turn out worse for itself. It would be irrational to consider China theorists hold that China would be so worried about losing a devastating nuclear war against the US that it would intentionally choose to start a devastating nuclear war against the US, and in a few causes conventional shift turns every advantage that's to war in 16. In view, it would mean the nation would depend more on its advanced conventional weapons. Inventory includes BMDPG as the equivalent to nukes and destructive power. The U.S. Could be spending more on weapons that actually use. Other nations do not compete. These countries have reasons to be worried. Adversaries will depend on nukes to deal with conventional superiority. The result would be a nuclear arms race, which even if you would not be able to deal with the vicious cycle of world that cannot escape. And conflicts never go nuclear. Prefer Russian. Okay, going on to China. In a few emboldens China aggression and prompts a large-scale conventional war between U.S. and China and Asian hotspots. That escalates to nuclear war. That's Colby in 16. In view would be unwise nuclear weapons associated with peace. Now, they only work because they ambitiously believe their use is possible, preserving their use nuclear weapons first, communicate to a neighbor that attacking vital interests, versus a devastating nuclear response. And if you would, it would make the world safer for prevention of war. Conventional wars escalate dramatically when powers and major powers involved, most likely reach the nuclear uses of nasty conventional war. And if you would, raise the likelihood of nuclear weapons being used competitive if the U.S. as a guarantee it would not use nuclear weapons, it would strengthen China's confidence. A good way to short conventional war forces and Chinese establishment or pushing military action in the essence of these voices would only be emboldened. And if you would, increase chances of war in Asia. What might be persuading Beijing that seceding is likely to backfire. Conventional war with China, especially over Taiwan, goes nuclear. That's Tom Edge in 18. Conventional forces generate pressures to escalate. Chinese leaders might think that while Washington games in the fog of war, Beijing might conclude a limited escalation was viable. This was the wars of war in February. Worse than flashpoint is Taiwan. This might lead to war. China could launch an attack, blockade harbors, would bomb the island. Conventional operations threaten Chinese nuclear capabilities. The Navy could threaten China's nuclear missile submarines. Any campaign would have to contend with China's missile force. The U.S. would take care of this. It would be impossible to leaving China's force unscathed. The share CNC wartime development could shift China's assumptions. Beijing might see nuclear escalation as the way to end the conflict. China could use nuclear weapons to destroy bases. To signal the U.S. crossed over the line. If China started a war, we believe nuclear weapons are irrelevant. Once the war did not go as planned, the Chinese reverse their assessment. China said its signal was actually considering using nuclear weapons, and this info led it to take nuclear weapons. And Chinese nuclear posture is internally motivated. U.S. nuclear posture isn't key. This is that's Lewis in 16. Tendency among analysts to assume China's forcible made for decades. Chinese leaders sought to match technical achievements without replicating weapons or adopting foreign doctrines. Chinese leaders view deterrences as arising more from equivalent capabilities and calculations of exchange ratio and vulnerability. China can embrace technologies associated with counterforce while not embracing strategy to implement China. Literature is legalistic. The evolution of China's forces have been guided by a desire to develop similar capabilities to meet military requirements. Nuclear policy precedes strategy. When many observers doubt and if you much of the debate about China is about how to operate effectively when the structures for them to overturn. And congressional restriction attempts failed. WPR approves. That's Woods in 18. Congress the WPR 73, the able the president and codified executive war making.
What car was that you stopped at? Woods 18.
Woods, yeah.
Okay. Ready for cross sacks?
Yep.
Alright, so on your Kun 18 card on Russia, where in that card does it say that NFU doesn't solve? Yeah.
It talks about how there are conditions like so the card cites examples like pulling out of the ABN treaty and New START and the INF.
Congress is moving forward with its own INF, arms control,
I'm not done yet.
Okay, this card looks like it swings aft because people are hoping.
Absolutely not. So this card says that there are alternative causes to tensions that you are pointing to, and NFU just doesn't solve treaty pullouts, right? Like you're not a treaties app, you're running NFU, so your app does nothing to solve U.S. treaty pullouts.
So the alternate cause to chilling out Russian aggression is a treaty that says we won't use nuclear weapons?
No, the treaties don't say we won't use nuclear weapons.
I mean,
they're arms control treaties.
Congress is moving forward with its own INF policy.
The New START treaty thumps it. There's no political will.
Arms control advocates are placing their last hopes in New START, which limits the strategic systems. I just don't understand how this card says NFU doesn't solve, because what it seems to say...
it's saying that there are causes outside of U.S. nuclear posture, aggressive posture, that have caused high tensions, and the NFU does nothing to solve treaty pullouts.
Can you explain your K to me?
CAPK?
Yeah, okay. What's the link to us, specifically?
We think that the way that you utilize technical policy fixes to insinuate
what
that we need to pass this plan, it's an NFU, it solves all of our problems. It reifies the neoliberal state in which we think that one policy action can just fix underlying issues writ large. And you're going to read an impact turn, and that's going to link you.
So, and what is your alternative? Like, how does that solve?
Reject.
Yeah, our argument, we're making an epistemological argument that if we win that capitalism is bad, then we should just reject that within the pedagogy because that's what we really spill over around.
Great. So because we pass a law, they should vote us down.
Because the app is bad. Like, that's
Why
the
is
right
it okay, but
debate.
the app is bad because we pass a law? Like,
The
what's
app
the
is bad 'cause you're
specific link
capitalist.
to no first use?
Like, yes, you have an app. Yes, you pass a law. If we win that it's bad, you should lose.
Right, but
Bigger
like,
question.
how does that link to NFU specifically?
What? I mean, I've
but it doesn't make
answered that
sense.
with
Okay,
regards
also,
to,
status of decay plan.
Conditional.
Status of decay.
Conditional.
but the planks aren't conditional.
Okay,
cool.
Conditional.
Alright, how do restrictions spill over? That's on more powers.
The plan sets a precedent that the president should not have control over war powers.
Is launching a nuclear weapon like an act of foreign policy or an act of war?
I don't think those are mutually exclusive. Like foreign policy is like war is inherently a foreign policy action.
Alright, thank you.
We're going to go over to present.
Addison spread.
Yeah, it is.
Which one was the
Just right out there. Go through the doors and then just turn right. So you're gonna be doing JV now science next year?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
And then you're Washington.
Yeah,
We'll be there for both.
good. Because I tried to accommodate last year and it was just a hot mess. And I'm just like, nope, fine, you wanna,
Do your thing.
yeah, we can do our thing.
I like a non-packet alternative.
Yeah,
It's close.
right.
And I'd like to show them that more schools would prefer packet.
Yeah, because over my cold dead body.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they make my tournament 88.
Yeah, separate, we use 3 minutes and 2 seconds. One second, let me send this out.
Wait, you said we use 3 minutes and 2 seconds?
Yes.
So that's 6:58.
You need to get coffee? Oh yeah, that's okay.
you're not.
Okay, come on. I'm saving my document. Wow.
One color.
Yeah, I've never flown 2 colors.
Never. Gordy used to flow in 3 colors.
Why?
And one AR gets its own special color.
Really?
Yeah.
I've just never had any problem with it. They're in different columns.
Sorry, this is very slow.
That's fine.
You're good.
And then when I debate, I really didn't flow the things I said.
Yeah.
I only flow the other team. So
I do that too.
Okay.
That bad.
that's bad.
Alright, I just sent it.
Let's look back.
The order is going to be NATO, China, solvency, assurance, ESR, exec flex, cap.
Okay, NATO, China, solvency, assurance, ESR. What?
Assurance, ESR, exec flex, cap. So it's the same
Uh huh.
order for one.
Let's start that over again.
Case in order. NATO, China, solvency. And then off case in order. So assurance, ESR, exec flex, cap. I think that's it. Can I borrow this again?
Now only Natalie can do that.
Actually, I'm going to change my mind. Put case at the end. We're going to do off case first.
So NATO, China, solvency
I'm
at the
gonna
end.
think what I want to do.
You should do case
I'm going to do case first. Never mind.
I just want to point out that choosing your strategic order and adjusting and talking to each other, that's prepping.
Oh, sorry.
I'm
So
so
just
sorry.
think about that one. Like you're deliberating over what the most strategic way to go about things
Sorry.
is. Just remember that.
Okay.
The world where judges kept prep time. That would have ruled.
Okay.
But then on the other hand, I'm lazy, so.
Is anyone not ready? Okay.
Okay, so starting with NATO Russia. European security arrangements and the relationship with Russia is going downhill. The NPR crisis cohesion that's both of our Diamond 17 cards. USAFU is a major driver in causing deterioration because the US is pulling out of nuclear weapons treaties and Russia is scared, and thus they have their weapons on launch on warning. That's our Cohen 17 and our UCS 15 card. NATO-Russia relations are deteriorating because of Russia's annexation of Crimea and the US-Russia proxy war in Syria, and with the play, Russia no longer fears the US first strike, so they ease their postures and they take their weapons off for prompt launch. That's our Kalina 16 and our Cohen 16 card. Only diplomacy is able to solve this, and the probability of war is high, and the impact of not doing the plan is nuclear war and extinction. That's our Diamond 18 and our Max 12 cards. And NFU solve soft power and advanced diplomatic channels to resolve space conflicts. Off the 316. Bold action necessary to maintain stability, sustainability. NFU bold action clear and ambiguous and regular reestablishing more high-ground leadership and space diplomacy implication. Nuclear weapons are necessary. Reduces credibility to prior leadership role, being material restraints of the U.S. space, supposed to the offensive and diplomacy. And conflict goes nuclear space diplomacy skill to solve Billings 15. Seizing of the ultimate high-ground conflict, ignite war on intentions approaching a made by China, Russia, any hostile action isolated to nuclear state space triggers the threat. And concerns over conventional wars are no longer relevant. Masisik and Bertram 17. Adversaries no longer conventional military force. Adversary represent indirect faction in the effort to avoid America's strategic and this is difficult for leaders to justify the mobilization of American resources to prevent adversary gains. And conventional warfare is a relic and isn't coming back with Eastern Conversion 17. Conventional warfare is that because no adversary wants to engage directly. No country dares use its military force in expensive fashion against the U.S. anymore. Foes are seeking to disrupt America by circumventing America's military strength through direct actions. Such actions look to shape perception. And conventional shift wants all points to Comparison 17. Conventional warfare is officially done. This become an obvious turn of adversaries engaging American military allies and conventional wars for British regard. America hopes to retain significant leadership with such a adversary who wants to fight the United States in a conventional faction. And on the deterrence, on NATO, the deterrence to the United back where the F is more likely to foster strategic stability. Kimball's 17. Now it's time to responsible checks the use of nuclear weapons to consider changes in outdated Cold War era U.S. policy that reduce the risk of nuclear ensure the sole purpose of nuclear weapons is deterrence widespread concerns about the states from to reinforce Congress the need to consider U.S. nuclear doctrine decision making. Washington has retained this option to use nuclear weapons. This policy is unwarranted and imprudent. Given the overwhelming conventional military edge of the United States and plausible circumstances that can justify the use of nuclear weapons with a non-nuclear threat, nuclear weapons are necessary to deter nuclear tests, and they're more effective and credible ways to deter and defend against these threats. Cut the card to defend against these nuclear threats. And first use posture is not credible. Only increases the probability of nuclear wars. Gerson 10.
A core element of use declaratory and operational policy must be credible and stable. Adversaries with the United States political resolve to actively threats and use nuclear policy when unnecessarily frighten and provoke states when they undertake measures that increase the probability of nuclear use with regard to credible and stability. U.S. nuclear declaratory policy that increases the option to use nuclear weapons for a time and credible, in which case had nothing to secure the United States from nuclear risk credible potentially dangerous against nuclear arms against it risks creating instability and intense crisis that increase the chance of nuclear war. And cut that next card. No Russia impact Putin Russia conventional self-deterrence credible 17. If Putin uses nuclear weapons against the United States military, even over the gates of hell, Putin goes against would likely be in pursuit of Baltic campaign. Why pursue nuclear weapons in the Baltics when he has other use methods semi-successful elsewhere? NATO and global comes to the assistance of allies and levels and techniques as well for the Article 5 collective defense provision. Putin ready to take the United States military indirectly. The nuclear weapons of the U.S. quarter provide the defense against the U.S. military would result to nuclear weapons first, and I'm far from alone. All the charges with China child will most of these long as they don't result in much more than certification for unleashing evil on the planet. Certainly when you possess the most conventional, most powerful conventional capabilities in the world with requisite firepower and accuracy to provide a credible alternative to nuclear use in its most imaginable context. And the Baltics won't go nuclear, and there is a high chance of miscalculation across the play. Our 1AC about how miscalculation is a high threat. That's our UCS 15 or mass 12 card, and the launch of warning will result in miscalculation because of the high tensions in that area, because Russia's systems are deteriorating, and we keep deterrence and assurance. So yes, China modernization. China's modernizing their nuclear weapons as their Johnson 18 card. Their hypersonic glide missiles because of USAFU, that's their Hint 16 card. They're scared they can't strike back against US force use, and US missile defenses can take out China nuclear weapons, so China's modernizing to prevent their death. India and Pakistan see this, and they don't have good relations with China, so they build their nuclear arsenals and proliferate fear that's creating cascading back. That's their Hint 18 card. And if you solve this by allowing China to relax their posture and stop modernizing out of fear, that's a Bal 17 card. And US NFU policy increases relations with China and India. Tina will enact in 18. And if you include China and India acknowledge the leadership at virtue when the power states typically disenfranchised with global nuclear order, and strong use China relations are key to solving existential global problem. Was 14. China and the U.S. work together to make essential contributions to solving climate change, international trade, nuclear proliferation, terrorism, and U.S.-India relations are key to solve all global problems. Asia Society Task Force 9. In matters which they have reached to prevent the U.S. and close relationship with India and necessary to solve global challenges to keep security, acceptance, and reestablish economy, overcome Islamic relatives, honors, principles, and power to focus on the challenges of the divergence to keep playing global business because the U.S. and India share values and grow more important in the coming years. Closer relationship with India will have strategic impact. And cross-apply deterrence arguments to the China deterrence arguments. They make the same arguments. So yeah, cross-apply that. Solvency.
Wait, China's not eternally motivated.
Yeah, China's not eternally motivated. Our Johnson 18 card and our Haynes 16 card show that China's modernizing because of the U.S. AFU, because they're scared that they can't launch back. Solvency. U.S. military officers don't follow blatantly illegal orders and insult the president attempting to order nuclear first strike that is directly prohibited by statutory legislation is blatantly illegal. There's no realistic scenario for circumvention. Congress does not fail because congressional checks are able to stop the president, and you should prefer how the military works and how there's no realistic scenario. Extend our Betts and Waxman 18 card that Congress can do it and it has the authority. Skip those cards. Onto assurance. Extend our federal and will show evidence of these 5 answers to their DA. 1. That status quo, first use fascist nature, ruptures with allies like Japan over the nuclear weapons ban convention, which destroys the landscape fusion and overall deterrence credibility. And then 2. U.S. first use posture risks short-term nuclear wars in the Korean Peninsula, which would draw on Japan and destabilize the security situation. 3. The U.S. NFU has no effect on the nuclear umbrella. U.S. has to use nuclear weapons in retaliation for nuclear attacks on Japan are highly credible. 4. First use has undermined U.S. credibility and extended deterrence and undermine U.S. conventional capabilities, which are vital to deter North Korean and Chinese aggression. Strong U.S. conventional capabilities are the best way to assure Japan. And then 5. Threats of nuclear first use are not viewed as credible, and that decreases the credibility of all U.S. commitments, that decreases the U.S. relations cohesion with allies like Japan, and lack of NFU makes escalation more likely because of commitment to Article 16. The U.S. is not needing to threaten to use nuclear weapons to deter a defeat a major conventional attack. There's no possible circumstance that could justify their use of nuclear weapons first to deter a non-nuclear threat. The employment of nuclear weapons by the U.S. would be counterproductive. No first use would improve this credibility deterrence against nuclear threats because of the so-called commitment trap associated with the current ambiguous policy regarding when and if the United States but use nuclear weapons. Cut that second card. And Mueller report is coming in implicate Trump defending the global nuclear capacity only checked on Trump's authority soft period 18. Trump made to declare that Ginger comes with the ability to launch a nuclear weapon at any time for any reason intensify domestic political rights and concerns about Trump's ability to raise questions about a system that gives presidential sole unchecked authority that's into the pressure on Trump. The Mueller report and complete carefully drew Nixon brought the lower level up to DEFCON 3 Trump could do worse on counterplan. Their Hawkins 17 card only describes tools that Trump could use, but it does not say that Trump would be effective in creating international credibility. His rhetoric clowns any speech in Congress, and their examples based on Obama, who had international credibility, and ESR's object fiat, which is bad. patent voting issue 1 for education. After defeat moves to the first half of the topic, the CP shifts the debate away from debates about workability of Congress or the courts restricting the president to hypothetical sessions of the president magically changing his mind and restricting himself. And 2 for equity, it divorces the debate from real-world literature and solves all the sophistry differences and counter interpretations that can run any governmental agency CP that is not part of the object of the resolution. And congressional approval is key to establishing separation of powers. McGovern 18. Nuclear weapons can be triggered very quickly and escalate so rapidly that the nuclear war the president makes a decision. The secretary has execute the orders about this decision made or systems of checks and balances don't apply Congress to himself. The privacy of the state should give the power to war to declare Congress restricting first use of nuclear weapons bill prevents any president from using nuclear forces to carry out the nuclear attack unless Congress has declared war. Others have to first start Congress needs to assert its constitutional authority when it comes to war, and especially when it comes to the catastrophic possibility of nuclear war, because war is war, and only Congress has the right to declare and authorize it. And skip that next part, perm do both. And exec flex. Executive presidential control over the use of nuclear weapons creates a code of the presidency that reduces sentences to serve and justifies the first view of executive power by torture and indefinite decisions lost for the extent of U.S. imperialism. Holmes 10. Presidency inhibited fosters a cold, elevating presidential commander-in-chief. The position meaning existence of the great power implies a lesser power monopoly of nuclear war extended all aspects of war. And CAPK. Rejection of the cap causes massive transition wars and fails. 3. No capitalist society can ever be realistic, so to relinquish control of the state apparatus without catastrophic appeal. Capital remain completely in control, so distinctly reduced to pipe dreams. And gross is sustainable and key to solve global war's obsession with doomsday scenarios, distract from the freaking strategy lumber. 13. Tech has innovations in place for great others overlook their own resources, but might take continued to thinking essential to doing gloom scenarios, distracted from program methods of poverty and causes of poverty, even their levels of inequality, pessimism, ignore the overall growth, the medical innovations, economic opportunities, and global relations. Motion 16. The world has many nations justifying more prosperous than ever before. One such institution is generally the open economy, which help promote the life-saving medical innovations of growth in developing countries. The result is then a perception of crisis, one driven in part by the institutions that have helped make the world a safer and more virtuous than ever. And conditionalities of voter and engages sovereignty over obviously contradictions, late development debates, and illogical reversion, rejected human fairness in education or interpretations, they surround counterplanes in cases conditional. We're going to perm do both. And perm do the after the ones of the day. Ready for cross A?
Alright, ready?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about your McGovern card. It says that
Which flow is this on?
ESR.
Okay.
It says congressional approval is key to reestablishing separation of powers. What is this congressional approval for? Like, are you not a prohibition?
We're talking about Congress approving NFU.
What?
Wait, never mind. Natalie, can you answer that
Hold
question?
on, I'm trying to find my card.
Can you restate the question? I think I understood it wrong.
I think your McGovern card is in the context of Congress allowing first use in certain instances. So I'm asking how like this argument applies. Like, is the plan that, or like?
No, the plan is prohibition. The argument is that Congress taking some control and reestablishing separation of powers is important.
Okay, so you can see the link to Flex. Okay. I want to talk about your conventional shift answers on NATO-Russia.
Yeah.
You say that conventional war is a relic. Can you tell me why? Like, why do countries not go to conventional war anymore?
New technology makes it irrelevant.
New what technology?
Kinds of technology. Military technology.
Give us an example. Can you give us one?
Are you asking why countries don't
Give
go
us
to
an
conventional?
example of technology
No,
that's
I
not
want to make
conventional
sure.
war.
Okay, so why countries don't go to conventional war?
No, give us. You said
Okay,
technology. Give us one
actually, I want to ask you about the 1AC. Let's talk about China modernization. Your Johnson 18 card. It's your uniqueness evidence. It says China has enhanced, China tested, missiles were deployed, these missiles enabled. Like, how is this evidence unique? Like, it's talking in the context of like past tense.
Okay, do you want our evidence to be in the future?
No, I want it to be like talking now. Like it says these missiles have already been deployed. Like how is this advantage at all unique?
China has been modernizing for a while because of AFU.
No, it says China has modernized. Like China has enhanced. China has tested.
Do you want me to break down bird tenses and history for you? I mean, honestly, China has modernized and will continue to modernize because of our AFU policy.
Okay, so China has modernized.
China
Like,
is continuing.
where are your
to
Wait,
modernize.
can you give us a definition of modernization? Because I don't know. I think we're talking about different things.
Building up a force of sophistication to counter an enemy that's adopted maximum endurance.
Really, doesn't that literally happen like all the time?
Because of our
Hasn't that
AFU
literally
policy.
happened since
Yeah, we
before
can
like
solve
civil
that.
society?
What?
Whatever.
Okay. Your Haynes card in the 1AC, China modernization driven purely by U.S. aggressive nuclear posture.
Yes.
Where does it say that in the card?
I'll pull up the 1AC.
Please
You
do
can pull
that.
it up. Okay.
Let's see. U.S. nuclear strategy is the number one factor influencing.
Okay, so it says it's the number one factor. Where does it say that it's purely driven?
It's the number one factor.
That's okay. Those are not the same
It's
thing.
the number one factor.
Like T number one factor,
so if
right?
you
Like,
have the plan, then it considerably stops this and way reduces the risk of miscalc. And again, this only has to happen once to end the human race, so that's important.
okay, so this is a miscalc scenario too.
Are you taking prep?
Nah. Yes, we are.
Okay. I'll start that now.
Be so confused.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
I was surprised that a place that builds itself as the mountaineers, that there would be so much sort of panic over snow. Like around Morgantown yesterday, people were like, "It's coming." Like, whoa.
Yeah, it wasn't that much snow.
No.
It didn't have a plow installed right, so it wasn't an issue at all.
Not very much. But like when we went out to dinner last night, they were like, the restaurant we went had nobody in it, and we were like, whoa. And they were like, yeah, there's no way anybody's gonna be out of this. But like, there's like not even any snow on the ground yet.
Yeah, I went to the AMC movie theater right by the hotel.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it was me and
Two other people, yeah.
Staff was hoping that they'd be able to go home early if no issue. Like,
Yeah, totally, yeah. I'm big on the big tournament movie trip. I do that quite a bit.
nobody wanted to go with me, but I don't go by myself. But
I go by myself a lot.
I have the AMC stuff's fast.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I go. I normally get there 4 or 5 times a month.
Yeah.
The money's worth. Used to be a movie passer, but the service deteriorated, so
Yeah.
I jumped ship. I like it's $20 for up to 3 movies for D.
Yeah, yeah.
3D, whatever, and I live like a mile away from an AMC, so it frustrates me that movies start at 1:30, go for 2 hours, and am I gonna be home in time for the bus for the kids?
Right,
It's
right.
like, you only start at noon.
When I lived in Seattle and my wife and my kid was still living up in Alaska, I just like didn't have anything to do. Like it would be like, like Tuesday night and like, well, it's 6:30. I saw so many movies for those years that I lived there without family.
Like you could watch Netflix, but you feel a little bit better going out.
I didn't have a television in my house, so I grew up without television, so I don't really need a television in my house. I mean, I have one now, but like
Yeah.
my apartment didn't have a television or anything like that, so.
Yeah, I haven't paid for TV proper for decades. It's just been like online content downloading.
We weren't allowed to watch television as children, so.
You're one of those.
Yeah.
Did you grow up better and stronger for it?
I think so, actually. I saw it at a friend's house, and we were allowed to watch, our TV shows we were allowed to watch were The Cosby Show, which you know, at the time seemed like a good decision. Well, that's good now. We were allowed to watch Magnum PI. I think that was it.
My parents would let me play Mike Tyson's Punch Out at my friends' houses.
Mhm.
They said the game was too violent and too realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at it now and it's just like, I can't believe this is what I was banned from
Yeah.
playing.
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to have a video game machine or anything like that, so I never had one until I was in college, or even past college. I got one when I was in graduate school. That was my first one. So.
I got it pretty early, but I was limited in terms of the violence that I was able to have, which is just such a joke compared to like games now.
You know, it's so weird because like when I first, you know, when I was like a teenager, I'd go to a friend's house. I would play like every violent video game I could. Now I don't believe violent video games have anything to do with violence, right? Like that just sort of like I just don't think they relate to each other.
Like causes people to commit violence,
Cause
I
like
think.
if you play a violent video game, you will do violent things. I don't think there's
A first-person shooter is violent.
yeah, well, like that's what people say.
Killing people.
But what if it's a game where all the characters are not real? Like, they're not even people.
Like Halo,
Or
like
Overwatch.
Aliens, yeah. I think that's less violent, but it's still pretty much.
I don't like where things die. Does that make sense? Like where they like die.
But Overwatch, you get infinite respawns, so like, would that be better?
What?
If you get infinite respawns, is that better?
What's infinite respawn?
Oh,
Oh,
you just come back to life after you die. Yeah, my son came up with that argument. We were talking about violent video games. Like, well, if you just come back to life and you just play Fortnite again, and I was like, well, doesn't that teach you to shoot someone and they'll respawn and this happens, so you don't get the impact of knowing that you actually
But
died?
I think that's like more cartoony than in tactical first-person shooters. Like, don't necessarily let in the same connection to
I just don't believe there's a connection at all. Does that make sense? Like you can play like a violent video game that's really like gruesome and it probably doesn't connect to people's violence. I just refuse to play them because I find them unpleasant.
Oh,
I don't want to shoot things. Does that make sense? As a kid, like I had no problem with this.
Yeah.
Now I just play sports video games because like nobody dies, nobody gets hurt. That's all.
Yeah, you don't worry about the virtual concussions you give your players.
I don't. Why are we more
You're just
concerned about
valorizing
this?
that.
Exactly. Lack of concern.
I'm sure there's injuries on the newest Madden when your characters come out for a couple of games.
But my 13-year-old son can't play very violent video games because then he just sits around and talks about violent video games all the time, and that's unpleasant too. So.
No, I think there is a big difference between, like, say, like, you know, Black Ops, where it's like your U.S. military going into other countries, you know, shooting and killing, versus the cartoony, you know, it's just like, you know, the glorification of throwing people overseas is an issue, but I don't think it makes people more likely to, like, become a school shooter just because they've played these games.
I mean, it's no.
At least some people in the military believe. I don't know how much research there is behind it, but they believe that one of the reasons why our troops are so efficient is because they are totally trained by video games to be efficient. The Army used to have a first-person shooter game that it trained its troops to play, and they stopped doing it because there was no need for it because everyone already played just as effective games at home.
They used, the recruiting posts by us, they generally have, you know, video games, like,
Yeah.
military video
Well, they just
games.
switched to having Call of Duty in them for a while.
Yeah.
They abandoned their own proprietary one and just had Call of Duty.
There's no need, yeah.
Alright, Joe, send it.
Can I wait for Reagan to come back? I'll listen to Reagan back if that's okay. I'm sorry.
I had a friend who was a Marine in Iraq, and it's anecdotal, but obviously, like, that's not science, but, like, he believed that.
I'll accept your pseudoscience.
He believed it was true. He was believed that, like, under fire, American troops were much, much better because they were so in the chaotic nature of first-person shooter games had enabled them to, like, be able to sort through.
But counterexample or counterpoint, like most like top players for first shooter games come from Korea, China, like Japan, like and like so like why is their military kept like at what point does it become like you're good enough?
I don't think it has to do with, like, being the best. Does that make sense? It
Yeah.
has to do with, like, just you play a lot. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think you have to be the best. You're just used to the environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like a chaotic, high stimulation environment.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Like there's like they're not the same. There's a big difference between looking at a screen and being like in a combat situation, right? With somebody shooting at
You
you.
get the virtual reality first person.
To make it as real as possible. Yeah.
Wouldn't the argument then be like the paintball is actually like much worse because it's kind of like an actual, like you're in there and the tensions are high.
Well, the military actually does do that.
Yeah.
You actually do play paintball. Like they have like combat simulations that are based on paint splattering.
I mean, that happens in the Child's Play 3.
What's that?
Child's Play 3, but Chucky replaces the
You
paint
also
with
went into
actual
that.
live ammunition.
Oh.
They start killing each other.
Trick!
Gotta watch out.
Trick!
That eliminates the
Got it.
sketchiness.
Like, we're both gonna go to the bathroom. And we're like, okay.
I wanted to pee
But I mean, like, yes, military simulations serve the purpose of training people for military combat. That's what that happens.
Well, my question was more like, because people like we need to get rid of violent video games. It's like,
I don't think we can get rid of violent video games. What?
like what?
Sorry about that.
What's the concept for that?
Oh, you should close the door.
I should.
They're all walking around, so it doesn't matter. But I just find them unpleasant. I just find them like I don't want to watch them. They're aesthetically unpleasant.
I understand your argument though, Michael. Like, if violent video games are too bad, then laser tag and paintball surely have to be just as bad. By extension, arguably worse, because you're actually
Nobody's
Laser
legs
tag is
explode.
violent.
Wait, technically you
tag.
are
I
shooting
imagine
your
probably a
friends.
lot of the
I just, if you're gonna say video
violent
games are
video
violent,
games
you said
would
that.
also be
I just did.
anti-paintball.
Oh, okay. I was like,
That would be my guess. I don't think many anti-video game people though.
Not anymore. Yeah.
Alright.
Other people who don't play.
Yeah, for the medium politics stuff, if you do get our chapters on
I mean, I have
paintball,
one.
it's always like,
It includes a rebuttal.
you know,
Like I
not
got
speak.
Yeah. What's up?
So basically the next
What you
question
need?
is my last speech.
last speech.
Not yet. Why?
In the speech.
Oh, for the NDT, yes. We did buy tickets for the NDT. See, we have to buy.
what's
I
the
should
order?
probably find out if you want to do we find that out tonight.
Alright.
Sure.
Advantage 1 Russia. Hold
Don't
on.
come to me.
I actually am in front of my email
Liz is on
right
the
now,
application.
looking at one of the confirmations, so I'm going to do it right now. So we're about to. I've put in the request for them.
Advantage 1 Russia. Advantage 2 China.
Sure. Wait, here's
I think you need to give third judges.
Oh, that's my B.
Yeah.
United.
Lobby. Oh, B.
Where, to Minnesota or to Long Beach?
Where's the B?
Where's the B?
Yeah, no, these were cheap too.
Oh, there we go. Oh,
Yeah.
it opened twice.
But yeah, no, we booked these tickets a while ago. Yeah. But alright,
Here?
I just sent you Christians, so
it's like it was
that'll give you some
like
flight information for the
3.5
group.
hours.
Alright, and I should know
It's
tomorrow
just
about
over,
Cedar.
like roads
Alright,
through counties
thanks.
and things like that. There's no interstate. Yeah, there's no interstate.
Sorry about that.
It's like
Alright.
really weird. You're like driving down these
Advantage 1
patches.
Russia. Advantage 2 China. The solvency page.
Okay.
The critique. And then the flex VA.
Okay, wait. NATO.
Solvency.
Okay, and then
And flex.
There's active skirmishes occurring over the names of these things right now. Like they one reassert. Oh, you mean Russia? No, NATO.
Actually, yes, in light of that, can you say the order just one more time?
Yeah, of course. Advantage 1, then advantage 2, so Russia and China.
Yeah,
Then the solvency page,
yeah,
the critique,
yeah.
and then the flex set.
Okay. Got it.
There we are.
Are we good? This debate is slam dunk for the negative. You're going to vote negative on presumption for a few technical concessions. This is a slam dunk, and I'm about to put my hand in the rim like Vince Carter in early 2000s. The Kroenig evidence was never handled from any of their evidence. The warrants when conceded. Kroenig is a full-on criticism of what miscalculation logics are and how they are fallacious. Because, for example, China would not. You should look at the last line of the evidence specifically. Indicates that China would never launch a nuclear weapon at the United States if they didn't want to get into a devastating nuclear war. The fact that we're undergraduate debaters should be extrapolated and signal in your mind that countries like China as well as Russia also understand that miscalculation is possible, thereby making miscalculation impossible because they can scenario plan around that, and they would just check first the China evidence that the Russian deterrence is at, and for this specifically shows that the plan kills Russian deterrence and forefronts Russian aggression. A lot of their arguments are with regards to the Baltics, but we have indicated that the Baltics don't really matter. That Russia doesn't really think that we're going to launch as a result of the Baltics because the Baltics because they don't think that we're going to launch the Baltic stuff. The Baltic stuff will go nuclear. This is a turn to their the advocacy because Russia deterrence. The Keller evidence also went conceded, which says launch on warning postures won't lead to miscalc, which is really good. Keller's one of the most credible authors that we've read. That says the command and control sensors and communication links are tested really well and are utilized by command and control such that there would be no miscalculation or nuclear accidents. They have never addressed the question in the cross-sex of the 1AC with regards to the Union of Concerned Scientists evidence from 2015 as well as the preponderance of their evidence that specifically says that hair trigger relation miscalculation will happen tomorrow, but they haven't actually happened from a matter of years, especially the UCS evidence and the Kuna 18 evidence is really good. It says that there's no chance of an arms control revival and that no first use can't solve, especially this gets coupled with our arguments about modernization and how modernization happens regardless and is not unique, which we'll get to on the other flow. The Harry's evidence is really good and says that it's not a question of resolve, not whether or not Russia can. They don't think they will use nukes because we frankly don't really give a shit about the Baltics, but we do care about our deterrence capabilities. The warrants 16 evidence or the warrants to it are going to get dropped on the 1AR. I bet you specifically says that PGS and ballistic missile defense systems are perceived as exactly as powerful as nuclear weapons by our adversaries and as well as our allies, which means that the affirmative can never solve because it's essentially the affirmative can't solve the harm that they have indicated because it's not sufficient to resolve those issues. They say that they are the two of the they say that first use is not credible now, which is the Gerson evidence, but it's from 2010 and is really unreliable. Also, this is a double bind. Either first use is credible and countries will miscalculate because they believe that our threats are credible and the commitment trap happens, or none of that happens because first use is not credible in the first place, and because first use is credible and the deterrence decides are proven true. They said that there's no Russian impact, but our 18 evidence indicates that the Baltics will go nuclear because Russian revisionism and adventurism results in a lack of de-escalation. Go to the and plan to circuit better Trump seems to election won't care about actions by Congress starting 17. Just the normal legislation for council the working as general because the president is commander in chief and Congress will learn say the legal that may be illegal. We have the Trump the book of the warning checking President's powers doesn't result because the nuclear option is available and zero political will ban in 18. Personally, we take back to war making powers that given up Congress that sort of discussion of rules and arms conflict dollars have given Trump a future person to go ahead despite congressional criticism of the president's prepared act the Constitution of the AU have vested presidency will war powers without approval of lawmakers that demand and enforce authorization. What I would hate to do is tie the hands of our military on our mindset that he's kind of again that the president might be astonished that the president did such a thing and relying on advanced conventional weapons for deterrence is now worse. Conventional weapons are more useful, make adversaries less likely to back up because they're not absolute. Conventional shift causes more miscalculation. Bradley and 15 strategies consistently communicating conventional attack indicating China's strategic return analysis for conventional capabilities of nukes. These are not constrained by the heavy and are more usable. The usability and the usability of conventional weapons undermines deterrence and causes nations to rely more on nukes because they can't compete with the US conventional aerosphere, global conventional arms race, and with the world free nuclear world the large scale conventional their Chinese changes the US nuclear marshals and stability. Chinese analysts have repeatedly insisted that the US conventional capabilities represent directly with the China security security and capabilities advocacy for military capabilities of machine general military for strategic stability. The same document that promotes the strategic stability ultimately represents for circular launches rely on nukes regime the operating for the war secures American demonstrated military conventional power repeatedly over the last 25 years. Mark the card during 5 years, and U.S. conventional warfare purposely destabilizing those nuclear trends, case labor in 2009. The forces of the nuclear force not deterrent nuclear production and peace on humanity, or something to provide deterrence in the most difficult civilization of conventional war, against nuclear armed adversaries, and reform the U.S. deterrence in the future that is, human rights adversaries have, powerful attempts to introduce nuclear weapons, put them on alert, test them, and use during conventional war against the U.S. military troops before to begin prevailing the battle of the U.S. adversaries may use nuclear weapons to compel a ceasefire, mark the party ceasefire, go to the China advantage, the Colby Chinese Russian evidence really gives specify that China specifically cares about deterring the salvage evidence, which I also just said that conventional war China will go nuclear, especially over Taiwan, the wars of which were completely conceded in the 2AC because they specify that Taiwan's very crucial hotspots China that they really care about, and China, the Lewis evidence is really good. The wars were not handled by the affirmative in the 2AC. That specifically said that China's nuclear posture is internally motivated because China builds tech without actually using it strategically. They just like to modernize. Also, this pairs with our defensive realism claims about how they want to show their destruction, but they don't specifically want to use any of their stuff. What evidence goes to see that said that war powers resolution should mean that you can't vote affirmative on sovereignty because Congress can just because the president can just say it's not constitutional and not abide by anything. The West evidence is really best, or rather their task force evidence. The last piece of they read in the 2AC superpowers tag only says that there's a strategic impact is really ambiguous, and it's only from 2009. When I was back in elementary school, and all causes to China modernization. Their author, Haynes and 16 external European environments only a variable and nuclear weapons, which is remember the nuclear club unifies the states recently given advancement the desire for intellectual prestige, brothers, a lot of brother and China's system to acquire nuclear weapons and China's bomb. This signifies the resilience and resurgence Chinese make nuclear decision based on the perception of war better until the elite against the status of the belief not stop but continue seen in the multiple nuclear systems after the Cold War. Chinese allowed the press to distribute parts of the video for missiles, increased precision and increased pictures and equally desirable for the CCP China using new modernization demonstrates increased scientific prowess and no impact. China faces mere limitations. A side development and elementary U.S. capability checks attacks. China has very limited satellites and capability with most of which are based in their territory. Possibly a monthly view should circumvent important cause. It would be extremely difficult. China to execute a sat operation. China's missile SBMs will not be able to reach an altitude of 20,000 kilometers GPS. China is operating the China makers. This is an ICBM will not be able to proliferate with imposing national strain because you launches it. Possible they send infrastructure limits on such a venture. The U.S. just based on China for is the second which is where they launch vehicles during the preparation strategies. Hey Reagan, if I don't get to the flex day, get ready to take in the 1 hour. My bad, sorry. I got ahead of myself. And no war, economic interdependence, hopeful and 12. Any market have seen out 3 wars, maybe more sort of the traditional policy news either. The markets are part of a larger trend which India increasingly rely on private sector to serve as an intermediary policy makers are into the cooperation economic issues built over defense relations are moving China India's middle class invested in economic growth and dialogue growth has made India middle class less vulnerable to war. China Pakistan already reopen the cooperative dialogue and skip the next card and no problem impact 2 game 15 right for the exam of the right to complete interaction multicularity between reverse CG different organizations GLP specific ability for random force or essential evidence series of order controlling our democratic capitals music polarity number of the nuclear states stimulated for the character explain interstate conflict versus the non-linear presbyterian finds and support of a large number of nuclear states and energy conflict. There's no evidence that nuclear states increase conflict dyadic level of periods can be relied on to for causal links. Go to the solvency page there. There can be a trap the evidence with conceded the argument and argument that Obama drew a red line in Syria. Nothing happened. There was an impact with the verse of the still evidence. They read the evidence is so flimsy and weak. It means nothing. And the Cohen hearing should already thumb intruder there and any their evidence and go to the K. Concede the limitation. It's just a test of competition, not advocacy. Cap is sustainable and the flex. The flex to settle, do some line by line, and he can read the cards. There holds evidence really that is what talks about Obama back when we were all in elementary school. 4 of us were in elementary school too. It's not only Trump already has a cult following, but every reason that why speed is good is a reason why they functionally drop the dissat, and we can win with if we just extended the 1 hour. Sorry, bro. Ready for classics.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you conceded it, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Okay. Thanks. Just making sure. And then, can you explain what arguments you made on solvency? You were kind of like solvency on Russia, solvency on China, solvency. Just like the main, like what you.
Like on the solvency page?
Yeah, like what were the.
Yeah, so specifically with the Kimball evidence, I cited the moment in cross-ex where I was asking about Obama drawing the red line in Syria in 2011. I also made an argument of a different flow. The commitment trap isn't real with regards to the double-blind argument. And the second piece of evidence you read, I specifically said that the ev is not really like conclusive about anything that is tagged about. And I also said that the Cohen hearing should already trigger this, like the
Okay.
Mueller report, right? So, like,
Yeah.
Cohen.
Thank you. And then what was the argument that you made on exec flex? You said like,
Yeah.
just
So
if you could explain that.
yeah, two things. One, I think your evidence is bad. It's from 2010. It doesn't talk about Trump at all. It doesn't assume the status quo. I think it's pretty important. And my second argument is that it's non-unique, that Trump already has a cult following, which is specifically what your evidence is talking about. But like every reason why executive speed and spillover is good, or stopping, spillover, restricting powers is good, is a reason why your evidence is bad.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the Baltics are going to go nuclear, but Russia doesn't care about the Baltics, but we care about the Baltics?
No, they think that we don't care about the Baltics. The Baltics is a scenario in which, like, stuff could, like, go nuclear. If we get into a war and already start to escalate, we would escalate.
Okay.
Right. But our first levels of the argumentation is that
Yeah, okay.
things won't happen because
Also,
they don't think we care.
the first use credibility double line, can you just restate that?
Yeah, you said first use is not credible now. Either you're right and it's not credible, and one, no miscalculation because no one thinks we're going to launch, and two, no commitment trap because no one believes our commitment in the 2018 NPR, or it is credible and deterrence, right? Deterrence also.
Okay.
Mutually assured destruction arguments.
Okay, thanks. Just making sure I had that.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Do you have any other things? Let's see. What was your argument about defensive realism on China?
Yeah, that was sort of just like an analytic that I coupled in. I think that the way that China utilizes modernization, well, I made the non-unique argument, but I also said the way different countries, as well as specifically China, uses modernization is sort of a defensive realist position, such that they don't want to just like modernize to shit on us with nukes. They want to modernize in order to just like have mutually assured destruction and like deter other countries.
Okay, thank you. Let's see.
And because technology is cool. That's another reason.
I think it's about time. I don't think I have any.
Alright.
Wait, no, yeah.
Okay, no, we can go. Yeah.
Never mind, I'm fine.
Okay.
Thank you. You good?
I'm gonna wait till he comes over here and we'll take a little bit of time.
Okay.
Alright, do you want me to start that?
Start that. Okay. Stop crap. 140.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Oh.
Oh.
Did I have like this?
Oh.
Why did you apologize for him putting this down on top of his floor?
I don't know. I do that
Just
sometimes.
be nice.
I just
He
apologize
apologizes
for
about
everything.
everything all the time. We're working on it.
Okay.
You'll send in the doc.
Yeah, that's it.
What's the order?
ESR, NATO, Russia, and then flex.
Where's my ESR.
Russia flex.
Yeah.
ESR.
I'm gonna be talking about the add-on that they read on NATO, Russia, the soft power stuff. So I don't know. I just assume you fled at the top. That's what it was. Alright, that was good.
I don't have the doc.
Thanks for covering it. We both don't have the doc.
Okay, ESR first?
Yeah,
I like
ESR,
having
Russia.
infinite tabs.
What's that?
I like having
Thank
infinite
you.
tabs.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's fine. You guys ready?
Yeah, I like being able to copy and paste.
Yeah, right.
Good.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
You're good.
Oh, I'm gonna answer condo stuff that was on the CapK flow.
You're good, bro.
On ESR. Okay. First off, on object, the key to test federal government, they need to prove that the plan is germane to the topic. Also, ground, there's a huge number of topic areas. The name needs flex. Key to check out bias, they get infinite pardon for the counterplan. And first and last speech, it's non-unique. All counterplans try to solve harms, PS the object in some way, and net benefits check. They have the option to straight turn, which ensures reciprocity. Reject the argument, not the team. We have better education because it's a legal topic, and we should be evaluating the different legal methods for implementing policy. And on condo, counter-interpretation, that it gets one conditional counterplan and one critique. This checks infinite regression and community consensus and reasonability checks. It's key to fairness, education, and testing, and reject the argument, not the team. And our Mecklen evidence says that Trump can deliver speeches, which is an effective method of communication and policy implementation, and the evidence assumes Trump. This solves the case because all of their internal links are about the 2018 NPR, and the ESR counterplan in normal means that Trump would reverse the NPR, which would change U.S. posture, and you can't perm because then that benefit any action that defines Congress and the executive in the war powers removes executive power outright. And on to NATO Russia. Deterrent prevents a space Pearl Harbor. That's more in 6. Space Pearl Harbors scenarios are scary tactics get. Yes, dramatic devices shows an emotional attack by their natural related Japan's leaders would ignore American history. Would any leader make kind of irrational bet today the U.S. was weakened in 41. Today the U.S. has the means and will fight effectively. And you know, should the wanted to launch Pearl Harbor sterile attack space assets would have first had to conduct many tests into U.S. observation satellites would detect the city when we leave the U.S. would respond vigorously to such provocation. Tigers do not attack people. Elephant and soft power cannot solve for global problems. That's Cohen in 17. Soft power states the same states have not stopped the North Koreans from creeping up on developing new weapons in American cultural magnetism is in the form of undergraduate degree did not prevent Mohammed diplomacy works only when there's the muscle to pack it up, and soft power fails to combat geopolitical problems in the real world. That's CRC and 14. He balance are compensated with soft power so much answer for Moscow's actions in Crimea strongly demonstrate the sharp limits of soft power. Political class has become intoxicated with the notion soft power can compensate for or replace hard power. The idea of soft power is operational policy should be buried. A track record for operationalizing soft power has been abysmal, never really much more than an illusion, but we wish for the world rather than one that exists. And soft power kills U.S. leadership turn space. That's Joffe in 6. United States should rely more on soft power, rely less on hard power. Soft power does not increase love for America. There may be little relationship between America's ubiquity and actual influence. The relationship is one of repulsion rather than attraction. America's cultural presence expanded in ubiquity so as the resentment of America's soft power. These feelings harden into governmental policy, and reliance on soft power results in short-term unraveling of the global order. This turns the rest of the case. This is Kagan in 14. Have never put faith in the power of soft power, and never believed that world opinion can prevent successful conquest by the military. They are not met by sufficient hard power response. They prove that there is such a thing as military solution. The lesson will be lost on others who will. Increasing power in other parts of the world, things begin to go bad. They went bad very quickly, and reduce soft power spurs EU leadership. That's Garavoglia in 17. Trump is president of the EU with opportunity as the U.S. withdraws. Europe has a chance to carve leadership role. Institutions and member states are the largest providers of humanitarian assistance, whether the EU institutions are collectively the 4th largest donor in development aid. The Trump administration increasingly signals its disinterest or hostility for these policy areas, but further call behind Europe when it comes to owning global leadership through soft power. And strong EU leadership prevents global instability. That's Guardian in 14. EU plays a role in shaping global trade arrangements with the largest donor rate in the world. The EU has a strategic relationship with developing countries every year. 300,000 women die in childbirth, and nearly half of all childbirth deaths can be attributed to malnutrition. And Trump's soft power spreads authoritarianism and instability globally. That's Rosendorf in 17. Trump has been investing in American soft power with a sinister cast to attractive to a disturbingly different audience. U.S. soft power efforts and legitimate Putin's role elevates Russian leadership at the expense of Democratic allies. Trump readily falls out of favor of the both American elector. He could be rendered a political loser and shoulder taking foreign policy with Trumpism down with him to be the humiliation of to short circuit the alt soft power emanating from Trump's White House over to Europe, Asia, and other regions in the Middle East, like in Africa. Let's go to Flex this then. 3 scenarios deterrents only the unitary executive can credibly and decisively threaten action, which requires speaking with one voice and not being undercut. That's true against the litany of threats from terror to rogue states. That's Zeisberg. And extinction independent of nuke scenarios proves only executive control solves conventional capabilities, so only the CP can ensure stability. That's Royal in 17. There has been seen because of deterrence. Enemies new cost of deterrence keeps war bay. We're living in treacherous times. Working bring out of nowhere. We're witnessing sharp upticks and more flesh one. If not dealt with swiftly, could lead to war gambling. Without proper deterrence, won't work. Jittery states will begin to stars over real estate. The U.S. treasury system keep World War III brain explodes. Does the U.S. intervene in the international system? These robust deterrence without a war, considering Beijing's warlike posture with what the world needs to overwhelming the deterrence chaos can be measured only through deterrence. No major world power can single-handedly control world events. Which deterrence with deterrence they can keep sparks from igniting fighting the flames deterrence is the best tool to keeping our world from entering World War III, and speed, 2 speed. Only the executive has the required dispatch. That's you in 17. The Constitution says the President would play a role, the leading role in national security. Presidents act with secrecy and dispatching energy, and the executive is essential to protection against foreign attacks. Foreign affairs are unpredictable, unsuitable to legislation that makes swift executive action in Congress is too large to take swift action, even when it has the same intel. Congress' decentralized structure would paralyze policy. Congress is isolationist urge to keep the U.S. out of Europe. A fascism group could come out of inaction, which of course all attack cut the guard there. Also, they conceded the link by reading the stop add-on. They said that there is spillover of congressional restraints, which means that we wouldn't 100% link for this. Just that, and specifically solves the existential terror threats. The executive's key. That's royal in 11. Terrorism coupled with WMDs can emerge quickly. Terrorists wield weapons of unparalleled destructive power. The attacks are difficult to detect, and the terror preemptive action taken by the executive may be needed more often. Relevant in the hands of the terrorists is the most dangerous threat to the U.S. 12 terrorist groups are CBR and rogue regimes are extremely unstable. Can inflict damage at higher levels. These regimes will the United States must pursue rapid action. Terrorist organizations, rogue states, and proliferation threats.
Was that the speed card? Did you not get to the?
Yeah, he didn't get to
Okay.
that.
All right, starting card now. Wait, just making sure. Okay, start card now.
See, but y'all's infinite tabs spoil the children because you'll be like, I could just, if it's in the wrong place, I can just cut and paste it.
Oh, I know, I don't do that.
Okay.
Unless like it's like, I only correct judge errors.
Yeah.
No, I actually flow it where they tell me to flow it, and then I'm like, oh, sorry, that's where you told me to flow it.
Yeah.
But if it's like, they like told me to go to a particular page and I didn't click the tab fast enough,
Yeah.
then I can be like, oh, it's more like for those situations. Or like I didn't leave an appropriate amount of space
I
at
mean,
the top of my
that's-
flow. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Stuff like that. Like my errors. But no, students, no. No, I don't
We're at 2 minutes.
line arguments up for them. That's their job.
Stop track, we use 5 minutes and 4 seconds.
How much of that?
5 minutes and 4 seconds with 6:58 seconds.
150.
Okay. Speed or so we're at.
Are there current evidence?
No.
Okay.
The order is going to be China, and then NATO, and then solvency. And then ESR, assurance. Is that not something to debate? No, war powers. Which are these the war powers?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so China, NATO, solvency, ESR, assurance, war powers.
Wait, where? On NATO, I'm gonna give you something.
Okay. Is anyone not ready?
You want me to stand?
We do that. Goodness. Okay.
You can use the stand if you want.
Yeah, I'll use the stand. Sorry about that.
That'll hold your clothes too.
Yeah, but I'm just kind of like holding my own paper. It makes me feel more in charge of the situation.
You do you, we do us.
And begin.
Alright, so starting with China modernization, we're going to see that there are all causes to modernization, and China isn't modernized because of NFU. But they dropped our add-on advantage, which is that NFU increases relations with China and India. And relations with China and India, relations with US and India, mean that we can solve things like security in South Asia, which completely solves their assurance they said, and terrorism, which goes against their CPGS argument. And high relations with China mean that we can solve global warming, trade, proliferation, Rachel, what are the things? Global warming, trade, proliferation, terror. Just a whole slew of issues. That's our West 14 card, ASTF 9 card, and Tannerwold 18 card. They dropped that, so it's 100% true. So you should weigh that as true. NFU boosts credibility with our allies. On to NATO. Okay, first strikes are not credible, and so that means that it weakens our credibility. It's not a double bind. Right now, we're not credible. That's the commitment trap. We completely have no credibility on things, and if we continue on this path, we lose credibility entirely, which means that the way the nations look at us, they don't trust us for anything. And miscalc will happen because of tensions. We didn't drop that. We cross-applied to the entire 1AC. All of our evidence points to miscalculation. And then on their Kun 18 card, their card describes how there are alternate causes to prevent an arms control, but all of the examples are treaties that do exactly what our plan does. So the only cause to an arms control thing, the only cause to like an arms race, is our ambiguous first use policy and the fact that other countries don't know what we're going to do with our nuclear weapons. And so we solve for that. And then on conventional, first off, conventional weapons. Okay, I'm just reading this card. Status quo CPGS system sparks World War III. Only US NFU solves for it. Shot in 10. The Pentagon's plan to fire ballistic missiles at terrorists isn't just a nuclear Armageddon risk. It's an expensive way to accidentally start World War III. Prompt global strike ICBMs would look to Russia and China like nuclear launches, risking an atomic response every time one of the weapons was sent to the sky. So NFU solves for this because it means that we don't have miscalculation as a result of conventional weapons. So yeah, conventional weapons are powerful, which means they still deter. That's our federal rule assault card, and it's more credible deterrence. And they're not usable because, again, we solve the tensions, which means that other countries aren't looking at us as aggressors. They're looking at us and they're going, oh, the US isn't coming at us. That's cool. So that doesn't make conventional weapons more usable. It makes the rest of the world more chill, tensions go down, us more credible. Okay, on to solvency. There's no circumvention. Military isn't going to follow illegal orders. They read that there was no way to stop the president until after, but the military isn't going to follow the orders of a president if the orders are illegal because they have allegiance under the Constitution, not the Commander-in-Chief, which means there will be no circumvention of this plan. And they say Congress has no political will. However, durable fiat means the plan passes, so that's not even an argument. The plan goes through, so Congress does pass the plan, and NFU happens. And then, look, the impact commitment trap is a complete loss of credibility. Nobody looks to the U.S. as if we are credible if we do not have the commitment trap. Rachel, where's your Mueller report stuff? Oh wait, no, that's on the other flow. Okay, on to ESR. First off, object fiat is, we're gonna drop object fiat, y'all are good. And then, didn't adequately respond to our turn on ESR. Where's my flow for that, Rach? I need that. I wrote stuff. Basically, that card, the McGovern card, talks about how the president has... Nope, that's a different thing. That's flex. Look, Congress approval is key, and that spillover that happens is not a good thing. We solve war powers. We prevent lash out and instability. So, all of their impacts are things that our AF does solve, so you should vote AF on that. And then ESR doesn't solve per perception. The president isn't credible. Nobody's going to believe him. And the fact that they are making the president's hate speeches proves that they are doing the object of the resolution. Like, that you can't just fiat the president agrees, but, you know, we're dropping object fiat, so it's not that important. And we can still perm do both. There's no reason that we can't have the OLC in the executive order and not have, like, have Congress do NFU. These things are not mutually exclusive. So we solve, this is how we solve executive flex because of the perm. Yeah, okay, on assurance. Wait, where's flex? Oh, there it is. On assurance. What did we do on assurance? Okay, there's a higher chance of miscalculation without the plan. So that means that if we don't have the plan, there will be nuclear war. They dropped our turn on this. And the net conceded that the Mueller report is the reason for Trump going to lash out into nuclear war and global nuclear catastrophe, and any check solved. So cross-apply that to executive flex. Checking Trump is good. And on exec flex, they said that there's already a cult of the president, so we don't have to worry about it. However, this card describes how if we give the president bigger powers, like nuclear weapons, that means he also is going to have smaller powers, like being able to torture people, which is not good. And the whole cult of the presidency thing means the president can just do whatever the heck he wants. So executive flex is bad. We conceded the link because we turned the impact. The impact is terrible, and we solved for that by taking that power away from the president and removing the cult that the president built. Because people believe he has all the power, they'll let him do whatever he wants. And if we take that power away from him, we can prevent torture, which is a good thing because torture is bad. So we outweigh on all the flows because we've turned so many of them. So they all flow app. Every single impact in the game, the app solves. We solve credibility. We make other nations look at us and trust us because we adopt NFU, which means NATO and Russia are no longer upset and confused about where we stand. Russia's no longer confused about whether or not we're going to nuke them. Russia understands the U.S. is not going to be at them. They take their weapons off launch on warning, and we solve for that miscalc intentions, so you should vote at because... And we solve war powers. You should vote on the perm too, because the counterplan is not mutually exclusive. Yeah, thank you. Our impacts outweigh theirs, and we solve for all of their impacts. So you should vote out.
What you got left? 150.
It's 140. We have 150.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
140, yeah.
Okay, I'll start that now.
Yeah.
Every little while I remember that we're hosting the NDT next year. And I'm like, oh god.
Okay, I just sent a card. Sorry.
What's that?
Oh, yeah.
I'm really sorry.
No, it's fine.
You know you'd have to ask Davis, since this is the NDT brought to you by Michael K. Davis. So I haven't actually even seen our own proposal.
Oh yeah.
Neither Lindsay or I have ever seen the proposal.
I mean,
I assume he's going to be running it. But I mean, I think we're concerned that because his job is actually like pretty demanding. One of our main concern is that at some point in time it'd be like, well, so this thing came up that's really important to the university overall, So good one. Yeah.
I mean, that's possible. I mean, he's high up that chain.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. That is like the most epic level university rank jump for
Okay.
yeah.
debate. Yeah, he's
So,
that's, no, he's like it's like
all right.
he's not in the chain of control because he's like an advisor. But he's the executive advisor to the president.
Oh yeah. So solvency page. Advantage 1 to Russia. Advantage 2 China. And then deflects DA.
Advantage Russia. But it's not linked. No.
We're good. At the top of the RFD, call me Nostradamus. I told you this shit would be a slam dunk, and I also told you they conceded making a lot of technical concessions. The 1AR should be pretty much completely discounted because they just made a bunch of really new assertions which were not warranted, which means that if I pretty much sat down, you could almost vote negative on presumption, but I'll do some work for you to make your ballot an easy, quick trigger. First, the Kimball evidence that talks about commitment trap. They pretty much functionally conceded the warrant to the double blind argument, which specifically that if first use is not critical now, which is something that they really reasserted the 1AR and the 1AR that countries don't perceive it and wouldn't miscalculate, which is something that was conceded, which takes all of the internal link off, and they also conceded, I'll get to stuff later. Then the second piece of evidence they brought in the 2AC on the solvency page, really flimsy and weak, and it means that, and it doesn't really mean anything, and the Cohen hearing should already thump, which means that the Mueller report has nothing to do with the debate, and you should pretty much just count that and go to Advantage 2 Russia, or Advantage 1 Russia. The first argument of 1AR was really bad. It says that we're not credible, which means that the commitment trap happens, but the double blind argument was on the solvency page and also should be cross-applied here. Specifically, the commitment trap does not happen. They have also conceded the 2011 Syria argument with Obama drawing the red line and having no impact to that. They said the conventional shift, quote, CBGS are good and key to stop terrorists or whatever, but they conceded the Tawari evidence as well as the Talmadge evidence, which the warrants outweigh any new cards they read in the 1AR. They also sent it right before prep ended, which was kind of shady, but I don't really care that much. The Tawari evidence specifically says that PGS and BMD are perceived as just as powerful by our enemies as well, our adversaries as well as our allies as nuclear weapons, which means that if you win and believe any of their impacts with regards to proliferation or in the miscalculation stuff, they link turn, internal link turns all of their offense, and the Talmadge evidence specifically specifies that China would go to a conventional war, would go nuclear with China over Taiwan, which was conceded because Taiwan is strategically and culturally important to a revisionist China, which is another warrant that went unaddressed in the 1AR. They said that if he solves no miscalc because of conventional stuff, but I did the link turn stuff above, and that doesn't really make sense considering the fact, whatever. The next argument was conventional deterrence solved, so yeah, you can vote negative because that makes NFU irrelevant if conventional deterrence and mutually assured destruction solved that in the first place. They've also conceded that mutually assured destruction and defensive realism solve any of their impacts, which means that you can't vote affirmative and you can vote negative on the burden of rejoinder not being met by the 1AR in the affirmative. They said that the military will circumvent, but this is a new argument of the 1AR also was not carded. Our star evidence is way better, and specifically it was conceded it says that Trump could launch nuclear weapons to have the trial in the bunker after he launches the missile. They said that General Fiat calls circumvention, but that's really bad interpretation for debate circumvention based on really good because it talks about it allows us to talk about what happens after the plan is passed with the rest of Trump circumventing should be really being a really bad leader. With regards to the launch warning, the counter evidence was conceded that the launch warning doesn't lead to miscalculation. The CNC centers are really good at communicate confluence are tested really well, and people communicate. Also, the Koenig evidence was also conceded specifically that says that it's irrational because other countries perceive miscalculation being possible, which makes miscalculation impossible. So we completely taking out all of the internal link with regards to miscalculation. He also says that China and Russia would never start a devastating nuclear war with the United States. Therefore, they wouldn't want to do that. Therefore, they wouldn't take the chance of miscalculation. So they just check first. I won't go for the deterrence dissent on here because it was really bad at the 2NC. Sorry about that, but I will go for the stuff they conceded on the flex dissent. They go to the advantage. Russia stuff. They conceded the impact turn on their space out on soft power has empirically and historically failed as a state policy tool on Crimea and North Korea and killed U.S. global leadership by creating American ubiquity and resentment abroad, turns the rest of the app by leading to the unraveling of the global order by destroying such successful military operations according to U.S. relations. They conceded that authoritarians will rise, which causes global instability as well. Any chance of their miscalculated internal links makes the vote negative because these would be intensified in a world where the global order is unraveling. Institutions like the UN and NATO have collapsed, and every country feels paranoid. This isn't great, but you should vote on it anyways because it was cold. Conceded by the 1 hour. Why do you say cold conceded in your block, bro? That's really cheesy. Impact of global instability and war. With regards to time frame, we win because they have conceded. They've conceded that it immediately happens, which means the U.S. should be very low. With regards to impact, threshold should be low. With regards to the magnitude, turns the entire case and results in nuclear war as a result of soft power. With regards to probability, it's high because of Trump as well as his soft power and his lack of soft power thumping everything. And the Woods evidence was also conceded on the China. The Woods evidence was conceded that any congressional restrictions attempts will fail, so you should. They have conceded this. The War Powers Resolution thumbs that Trump could just pretty much say that they do the same thing that everyone does with the War Powers Resolution, say it's unconstitutional, just do the shit anyways. Which, yeah, they conceded so many circ arguments. It means that like try or die framing doesn't beat presumption. I'm sorry if you can't explain to me why they were why you could vote AF, don't vote AF. The Lewis evidence was also conceded says that China's nuclear posture is internally motivated because China builds technology without actively trying to use it strategically. They also will consider the defensive realism arguments as well as the mutually assured destruction argument solve any of their external offense with regards to the impact level of the affirmative on the flex design. Oh, I don't know where they did the Indo-Pac stuff. I'll do that here. With regards to India, Pakistan, they have conceded that in the Kargil War they had nuclear there was nuclear chest thumping and nothing happened, which is a concession. That means that you can't vote on any Indo-Pak war scenarios. And with regards to the flex, flex D8, the one deterrence is really good, and only executive control is converted incredibly threatened action, which is the only thing that could actually do that while avoiding miscalculation, because we took that out, which was the Zeisberg evidence, which one conceded. The royal evidence also one conceded says that there's really different deterrence as well as the series, but only executive control can solve conventional warfare. The U evidence says that speed is good because only executive is required. Dispatch. By the way, you should read like a U indict. But anyways, whatever. The royal evidence was also conceded says that existential terror threats like terrorism and WMD terrorist threats get proliferation, which means that they conceded that we turn any offense on the terror turn that they had, which is really weird. Yeah.
Okay. We're going to start prep now.
It'd be weird if we didn't have like a big room.
What?
It'd be weird if we didn't have like a big room.
Yeah, it's become sort of less important because has taken off.
What's that?
It's become less important as internet's taken off. Like I think it was Kentucky or something. Like today, had two big rooms and then half the people went to one and half went to the other. Streamed it.
Oh, so fun.
Ignore this timer.
I did not come into GMU expecting to have the NDT there, so
Yeah.
It also has you.
I would really have preferred not, honestly.
We've been flowing. Yeah. Lit.
Nice. Cool.
Order's going to be solvency, Russia, China, assurance, exec flex, ESR.
Solvency, Russia, China, assurance, exec flex, ESR. I think you should do ESR on the exec flex. Assurance. Okay,
solvency, Russia, China, assurance, ESR exec flex. ESR exec flex. Where are my clothes? Okay. Is anyone not ready? Okay. Okay. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff going on in this debate, and it's kind of messy. I'm going to clear it up for you and tell you why affirmative is the only option. First, on solvency. The neg is arguing that we conceded a lot of circumvention arguments, but they conceded our most important argument, that the U.S. military does not follow blatantly illegal orders. And they've extended a lot of cards saying that, like, Congress is not going to pass the plan, and, like, the president's going to circumvent. And, like, yes, circumvention debates are good, but that doesn't mean that your circumvention argument is true, because the military will not follow blatantly illegal orders. They didn't directly answer this, so that means it's true. So we have 100% solvency. We didn't drop any of their solvency arguments. We're extending ours. We did concede the double bind. I'm gonna move on. Okay, Russia. So in regarding to NATO, they kind of dropped all of the deterrent stuff. But anyway, so miscalculation leading to nuclear war, leading to extinction. That's the story of this. Soft power is okay. Anyway, on soft power. Soft power is going to increase because the U.S. is more credible, which is good because our relations with our allies are more are better, and that's our credibility that they can't solve for. And I don't know what this is.
It's not Trump's soft power.
Yeah, it's not Trump's soft power. It's Congress's soft power. But anyway, even if you believe that they're winning on soft power, our app impacts outweigh on magnitude and time frame, because theirs is just instability and it's really far off, and ours is soon and it's extinction. Taiwan. The neg completely conceded our U.S., China, India, our add-on. They kind of glossed over it and just said that they were bad cards. They never actually interacted with any of the warrants, and so they conceded that NFU results in better relations between U.S. and China and U.S. and India, which is able to solve for proliferation and terror and climate change and trade and a whole laundry list of impacts. And instead of actually arguing with the cards, the warrants, they just kind of dismissed them. But anyway, you should vote affirmative on the fact that an NFU policy increases relations with all of our allies and all of our adversaries, which means we can solve for extinction and solve for all of these laundry list of impacts. On assurance. They again have dropped our turn that NFU means that having the AFU posture means that there's a higher chance of miscalculation. So they dropped this, which throughout the entire debate, again proving another reason why you should enact the affirmative plan is because it leads to a lower probability of miscalculation and it assures our allies. And they dropped again our Mueller report. They just said that Cohen thumps, but the argument is that these attacks on Trump are the reason that Trump would lash out and go to global nuclear catastrophe, and that only the checks on the president is able to solve this. So again, on exec flex, like, checking Trump is good. They conceded this. They conceded that the only way to solve for this impact scenario is to have the plan, which is a check on his presidential authority. ESR. Okay, so they dropped the perm and the 2NR. Thank you. I'm going to go for the perm do both of doing the plan and doing the counter plan. And so this is able to solve because it means that we have credibility, and it means that we can solve all of their impacts, and their only net benefit was war powers, but exec flex, but we're going to turn that. Anyway, so you should vote on the perm because because they don't solve for perception because Trump's not credible, but only the permutation is able to solve all of their impacts, war powers. We get out of their net benefit to the permutation through our war powers argument, their Holmes 10 card. So
the Holmes 10 card.
Yeah, the Holmes 10 card. This says that there's a lot of powers that are in the president.
Give him nuclear power. That means that he gets other little powers as the Colt when he uses nuclear power.
Yeah, okay, so the argument in this Holmes 10 card, we've been extending this card throughout the entire debate, that the big powers of the president leads to the little powers with his cult, and that authority over nuclear war, again, leads to torture, detention, imperialism, and the perm means that we solve this too. The president is able to be restrained, and so on exec flex, we keep deterrence. We've been arguing this through the entire debate. You shouldn't vote deterrence as a reason to not vote the affirmative team because we are able to solve that. And the credibility is in the favor of the act because only this legislative process is able to solve for nuclear war and extinction. What else do I do?
Read this stuff.
Okay.
Impact Calc.
So, basically, overview impact calc. We are able to solve through credibility with our allies and our adversaries, meaning that the U.S. is allowed to work with others to solve for climate change, trade, pro-lift, security in South Asia, checking the president and the code of personality and war powers. And you have to vote on the permutation because only the affirmative is able to solve for by the permutation you solve for the add-on with India and China solving the laundry list of impacts. You solve for miscalculation leading to nuclear war.
And even if you believe it's
Yeah, I said that. Even if you believe the soft power is bad, we outweigh on magnitude and time frame.
Because it's about credibility.
Because-
so we still work with China.
Yeah, because it's about credibility, so we can still work with these countries. It's not
China
just
and
about
Russia solve
the
space
soft powers. China and Russia is also able to solve this.
Talk about that in the which was space jump.
Okay. Anyway, so the main reason that you're going to vote affirmative is on the permutation that the 2 NR drop because we solve war powers through the plan which checks Trump, which means that he's no longer able to lash out. And so you should vote affirmative on the fact that we solve nuclear war leading to extinction, and we solve for the credibility of other countries, meaning that we can solve for our laundry list of impacts like nuclear war leading to extinction and all of these other impacts. What? And there's no circumvention because the military won't follow blatantly illegal orders, and there's no realistic possibility scenario. I forget the word for that. Yes.
Good debate.
Good, wow.
I'm
Good
coming.
debate.
Good debate. We can be friends again.
Good debate. Really.
Honestly.
I do think that the Alex Jones preempt this debate made it a lot better.
Honestly, I felt so much closer to you after that. I was like, wow. I didn't even feel like we're enemy during the debate. I was just so inspired.
The moment the Mason and Liberty novices like come together and like have a party, we gotta explain.
Honestly, y'all are like an hour away from us, and we never hang out. We music.
Because it's an hour away.
Well, I mean, it's pretty far.
What am I? Yeah. What am I? How far is it? After 88, I'm supposed to go like 3 months without seeing GMU people. That's not so
More
sad.
than that.
That's yeah, exactly. That's good. That's half a year. I like that.
You know, we should have at least one time where it's like at the same hotel, so we can just like chill the night before.
Won't your coaches disown you if you guys start hanging out together?
Like some Romeo and Juliet, but in our friendship sense. I didn't hear anything.
Is that Bishop? Is that Ian Levitin?
Oh wow, the buns of power are up. Should have let me able to read. They did.
guess that was the last one.
Okay. We'll find people.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, they're so enjoying it. I'm so sorry.
No, nothing good. We skipped breakfast.
You try not to. There's too
I
much.
always find it hard to eat at the big joints.
Yeah. The whole bottom. Stare at your feet.
I feel slightly more coordination.
It's less
So add some ice.
Oh, did you hear about what Decker said with Pobbin the other day?
Yeah.
Pobbin was running a hall. And then he was like,
That's the fastest I've ever seen you happen.
I did do that. So disrespectful.
You just like being shit trying to get into the band yesterday.
Alright, congratulations. It is a 3-0 decision for the negative. Alright, so the debate's really disorganized and actually really hard to follow. And ultimately, I kind of feel like there's not a lot of listening going on between teams. Maybe at the end of the day, if we're if I'm sort of being generous about some things, you maybe solve this torture argument. Like maybe you spill over and have some sort of thing that you fix with torture because you restrict the powers of the president or something like that. And maybe this India and China relations argument, maybe you help with that, although I'm not really quite sure I follow the entirety of that line of argument. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of things that you probably aren't answering enough at all. This conventional shift argument is like a pretty big problem for you and doesn't really have a cohesive or coherent answer to it. Although it's not extended in a way like it's kind of really hard to understand quite how you're going after some of these arguments. Like it doesn't all fit together at times, and I keep wondering whether or not you've taken out your own arguments by other things you've said because you only have at times only have half complete thoughts on subjects and you're not explaining things all the way through. But at the very least, if I sort of assume that if we were to do an NFU that would lead to reliance on very powerful conventional weapons, that would also make our allies, that would also make people fearful of us, which would lead to arms racing, which would lead to some bad impacts. I don't think that your India-China relations argument solves that, even if it solves, even if I was generous enough to say that maybe it solves terrorism, and that's like an equivalent impact to the flex disad, part of the flex disad. You certainly don't fix this problem. You also don't sort of have any miscalculation arguments because you're just kind of not answering their miscalc stuff in a couple of different places. There's also this soft power bad argument, which I got to be honest with you, I am the internal link to this argument kind of just disappears early on, and we're just don't have a coherent narrative from either side. We're just one's we lead soft power, it's we don't stop, we stop, that's bad, right? But that's the way the debate got went down, and I can't really understand how the flex disad and the soft power disad, or how your turns to soft power work out together. They feel like there's something uncomfortable about how that stuff fits together. I would just overall feel like even though I end up voting on the conventional shift and really no AF impact that outweighs that, and probably the flex disad partly stacked on top of that. With maybe the soft power stuff stacked on top of that. I really can't figure out what it if someone were to ask me what it is your terminal position is in the debate is, I'd have a very hard time explaining what the neg the coherent neg worldview is. Don't do NFU, and if I started listing it off, I feel if you were to turn it into a 3-part thing where you're if you're a 3-section essay and you're like, well, don't do it because of flex, don't do it because of soft power is bad, don't do it because of conventional weapon shift, that like somebody reading that would be like, these things do not go together. But it's ultimately just not here or there in the debate, and you just don't have a whole lot going for you, AF team, and we just need to be like on top of the game a lot more. And what the only thing about, I'll let the other people give their decisions. But the only thing about that is like, it just kind of seems like we're answering arguments that have been dropped. We're not extending arguments that they have maybe conceded. Well, you know, we can't really go for a counter plan. We can't really go for a counter plan that's not extended as a permutation. Like how that would even work out in your world, you're like, you should vote on the permutation of a counter plan that they're not really going for, is really, okay, I'm probably never going to do that, but let's just say someone would. You should probably explain why and how they should do that and what that would mean to advocate a permutation. Does that make sense? Like that's not me, but like maybe someone could, and if you want that to happen, you've got to explain what that does, and it's just like, it's a kind of a non-starter. Does that make sense? Like where you're at. And I think we've just got to be a lot more on top of it, because you know the disorganization is obviously very negatively affecting your ability to sort of keep up in the debate, and the problem is that they're kind of disorganized, and you're just like, and it's just there's sort of a cascading effect, right? Because when you don't have your own organizational pattern or own organizational structure, and the fact that they're disorganized means that you know probably in some debates you rely upon the other team to hold the debate together, but when they're not doing that, it just seems like everything is kind of falling apart, and there's like a lack of comprehensibility occurring.
Okay, I'll go next. I ended up voting negative on the soft power turns. I think that they resolve most of the offense that is remaining at the end of this debate that the affirmative is claiming. I did think it was kind of smart to advocate the permutation on the counter plan. I just think that he is right in the sense that you do need to do a better job of framing exactly what that means, specifically in the context of their presumption claims. Because I think that that's what hurts you in this debate, in this 2&R, where you go for kind of like everything, like you go for like this presumption claim, and like you don't really close doors on the counter plan. There's a permutation out there that they claim resolves the net benefit in the 1AR that you never respond to. And as much as like intuitively it makes sense, like how this permutation might not be able to resolve the executive flex argument, I still think that it's a conceded argument in the sense that they articulate some type of way in which like both Congress and the executive doing it together still allows the executive somehow some flexibility to residually solve for the links there. But the problem is that I don't believe that there is an impact to the negative flex disad outside of like terrorism or like asymmetrical warfare that wouldn't be subsumed by like the war scenario on the soft power disad. I also think that probably the permutation resolves a lot of your circumvention arguments as well in this debate, which just means that there's probably a risk that the AF does something, but in this instance, I feel like I have to default to the negatives presumption framing in this debate, because you don't give me some type of counter framing in which, because they read a counter plan in this debate, that presumption flips, meaning that you presume affirmative in that instance, and that they should have, they did not do the proper closeout work in this debate. You should judge kicks are bad. Like, you shouldn't just kick the counter plan for them. The 2NR did not make a decisive stance about which world that the negative should, that the judges should evaluate at the end of this debate. So, because the counter plan was in the block and could have been part of the 2NR and was talked about on the neg flex disad, you know, like, and we said this permutation resolves this offense, and this was just completely dropped by the other team, so then you can get some leeway to spin and resolve the rest of the debate. And I think an explanation with that, combined with like a reason why presumption flips and why they don't get the status quo, they only get the world of the counter plan versus the plan. Permutation means that this round ends, because you don't get to evaluate just the status quo anymore. Both teams have kind of conceded that a change in the status quo is necessary, so it's a matter about which change that we make. I do think that you are behind on a lot of the case debate, particularly like the conventional shift. I think that this double bind argument is good in a world where like you're just going for case. I felt like this was like one of those arguments that I think had tension with like the executive flex disad in this instance, and it would have been. I think the best 2-and-R strategy was to just go for case and presumption. Yeah, like kick out of the rest of the debate, perms a test of competition, this concede the defense on the disad, and then just go for the straight turn on soft power. Like, because like that's just not answered until the 2AR. They're just like soft power is good in the 1AR and just blow over that, and you read like 3 different turns. You also need to do a better job of like their only like internal link here is credibility, which is why I think that because one of your internal links you're extending into 2-and-R is that soft power leads to not just bad leadership in this particular instance, but the unraveling of the entire global order, which in my mind would also probably unravel any relationships you might have with China, climate accords, things like that. But you should probably say that in the 2-and-R instead of just like blowing through your partner's like pre-written responses to that argument. Like actually make that a centerpiece of like the 2-and-R strategy, because I feel like in this debate, because of the lack of closing doors and because you kind of like tried to just go for little sites of offense you felt were conceded, there wasn't a lot of big picture stuff, and the affirmative was kind of making a shift to do that in the 2AR, and I felt like if they would have just, because that I actually took the longest to make my decision because I thought deeply about what they could have done, and I felt like in a world where they make the proper framing arguments and articulate the permutation a little bit better, I feel like you could have lost this debate in the 2AR.
So just can I ask a quick question? So do you think I think kind of after the 1AR we weren't really sure what we were just gonna go for. Do you think maybe just making a decision like, okay, case, conventional?
Yeah, make a decision. That's what 2-and-Rs are about.
I mean, yeah, for sure, but like,
yeah, you should make.
What do you think like the clearest? I guess most
case.
Yeah,
100% that soft power. Yeah, I'll say that. I mean, I was wishing that it would not be a 3-0 because that 2-and-R did not deserve a 3-0 in this round. You would have gotten really bad speaker points if this was a preliminary debate. You spent min of the top tooting your own horn by looking at Notre Dame and look at how cool I am. But it was just, I did not flow a single word because there was nothing in there that was impacting the analysis or anything worthwhile besides making fun of the other team. And honestly, it borders on the line of getting to a point of being rude. And then you make fun of your partner who wrote cold conceded. That's the cheesy line? No, that's actually an important thing to point out. Yeah. That something is being conceded. So it's like, in terms of you being a good person, you don't have any, good people points at the end of this debate for me. I would say outside of that, it's like, you don't, like, they're one out in this debate, or I guess two, is like the permutation, you just don't go to the counterplan whatsoever. So it's like everything that Kozak says about how the 2AR could articulate it is a reason for why it gets them out of everything in the debate round. If the 2AR does that, you lose the debate round. And then the India stuff where you're just like, and the evidence isn't very good, and then you move on. The soft power stuff is all conceded with a bunch of impact analysis, that's done in the block, that's done in the 1&R. There's a EU leadership that's, going down now. EU creates a global security, which then solves for that India relations and like the environmental impact type stuff. And then if you just frame those impacts as being conceded and then you warrant that out, there's no way I could vote on anything for the affirmative team if you do a proper kick out of the counterplan, which would just say they've never said the permutations and advocacy is just a test of competition. Next, right? But instead, when you decide to kick out of positions on the next side, you just don't go to that piece of paper, and that will lose you the round because there's offense on those pieces of paper that the app could go back to and do. The winning 2AR is like the only impact that they sort of extend here is the flex disad and then the soft power stuff, but neither are really implicated in terms of the 2&R. So now I will impact out the India scenario, but you're just like, and it's like, I think environment and it causes like pro-lib and maybe terrorism. It's like, you might only have a minutes amount of prep, but that minutes amount of prep should go to that impact card, pull it out and explain why those things come first and why those outweigh, opposed to telling me that your miscalc scenario is gonna, weigh the debate on time frame when you're just behind on that. You could just be like, okay, no miscalc, we're not going for any of our original case solvency stuff. Our app is irrelevant. However, they've conceded that we increase relationships with China and India. That's a impact scenario that we'll leverage against their remaining impacts. Game over. And I think the 2&R could have shut the door on all of that by just sort of actually doing the impact analysis with soft power EU, doing comparisons, kicking out of the counterplan opposed to assuming that the flow just didn't exist. And I think the 2AR was smart, going to that perm, but you do have to do a little bit more work than just be like, the perm solves these things, because even if it solves like The disadvantage, I don't think it solves the soft power situation, right? And maybe it does, but you don't do that analysis. I like the argument that Chris gave in terms of I don't get to divert to the status quo, which means he's linked to both sides, and then it's a question of which is better. We have solvency deficits against the counter plan. They're not really doing those presses as much come there, and that's the way that I ended up voting. But that work isn't really done, so it's just collapse down to your positions. 2 ARs have to make choices. 2 NRs have to make choices.
Yeah.
So, let's talk a little bit about 2N in a minute, because I haven't gotten my cuts in on you yet. I think that the problem for me about two things. One is the problem about your short trash talking is that you're raising the bar for yourself to
I didn't mean it to be that way, but yeah, you're right.
Well, I don't really care about whether you're nice or not. I'm a little different about that. I just think that the problem is that your rising expectations are damaging. If you're gonna talk, you've got to do better. Does that make sense? That's the problem, right? So it's hurting you in that sense.
You're writing checks your butt can't cash.
Yeah. So that's the problem. The second thing is I think that you the other thing is it's the second time I've seen you. The second time I've seen the same sort of cross-ex to start out with, which is your cross-ex of your original cross-ex of the 1AC feels a little bit like this. You say that Nazis are dangerous, but they were elected in 1933 and it's 1936. What evidence is there that Nazis are going to do anything bad, right? Your presses on impact scenarios like Miscal are just they're just all wrong. Does that make sense? That there's not a moment in time when I'm that's a persuasive argument. The Union of Concerned Scientists is not they're not it's not if Miscal didn't happen in the last week, that means it's never going to happen. That's you follow me about that? But you're very sure that these are killer questions, but to me that they're the opposite of killer questions. They're the nature of miscalculation is that we don't know when it's going to happen, which is a criticism of it as an impact, but being I just don't think that's a route to pursue. And all your questions seem to be kind of like that, it's a version of the high school question that happens, which is that if your plan was such a good idea, how come it hasn't happened yet, right? Which is just sort of these presses aren't helping you. Does that make sense? And I think you need a better question than that. It's one thing when you get to deterrence to be look, there have been 70 years or 65 odd years of nuclear weapons being more than one nation possessing atomic weapons. How come the deterrence hasn't broken down over the many crises that occurred over the time? At least there's 65 years of evidence. Does that make sense? But the miscalc over scenario in last 2 years scenario is and maybe just because your panel's a little older, so when you're
thinking this,
that's forever ago. We're no. Does that make sense? That doesn't seem forever ago to me.
You're 2009 when I was in elementary school, and I was that's when I graduated. That wasn't that long ago.
That was, for me, I think we're in order of oldest, middle, youngest, right?
I guess so.
But, how old are you?
I'm 31.
Yeah, exactly. So, these don't seem a long time ago to go to me. Does that make sense? So, it's just it doesn't work the way you think.
I would just say one thing to add about cross-ex that I tell my debaters: don't argue in cross-ex. Ask questions. Mm-hmm. You do too much of well, here's my argument. What about that? I'm that's for speech time.
Okay.
Cross-ex is about establishing links and drawing out internal link chains and casting them in ways that prevent them from shifting out of those arguments when you make them in your speech. But instead, you just kind of forefront them so they can shift in cross-ex, so that when they you try to make the arguments in the actual debate, they've already set up the shift, so it doesn't seem like a shift. Now you're just reading arguments that don't link.
Yeah.
Which is why your questions do the opposite of what you intend them to do in a lot of instances. Ask a series. One thing that I do with my debaters when we're doing cross-ex drills is answer and response trees, the same way lawyers do for cross-examination. You should have a line of questioning. It shouldn't just be a question and then end point. There should be a setup question before that. You should lead them to a conclusion through a series of questions so they can't get out of it.
Yeah, this is just a really subpar debate for me. My bad. It's all right. I had a quick question though. What did you all think about the Kargil War thumps India Pakistan stuff? The kind of argument that like there was nuclear chest thumping in the 90s, early 2000s, nothing happened.
I gotta tell you. What do I think about that? Like, do I think about that like in the abstract or
like?
what?
No, I mean like I think that's kind of like one of the answers that we make on the India-Pakistan stuff. I feel in cross-section in like the block and 2NR. So like I was just wondering.
Well, it doesn't answer their India relations scenario.
Okay.
You get that because it's not about just like India and Pakistan are going to go to war, but the way in which the U.S. will be able to work in relations with India and China in order to solve a bunch of different conflicts. So it's sort of like it's a soft power scenario. It's like the U.S. soft power will get India on board, which is why our soft power trends are so good to that. It does work for some of the miscalc type situations, and I think it gets you like it decreases the probability of these things, but it's never going to hit all the way to zero.
I also just think, you used this last video I watched it, I also just don't think this is a Slayer example. Like, this is like being like, when people are like, hey, the Cuban Missile Crisis, that shit didn't lead to nuclear war. Why would this one? You're like, that shit almost did. Like, we all almost died. Does that make sense? And so, like, what do you, like, Cuban Missile Crisis happened. The lesson I learned from that is don't worry about that stuff anymore. Does that make sense? It's like, exactly, those things are worrying. So the Cargo Crisis, it's also specific, like I don't know why like another team's argument wouldn't be like, well, okay, that was related to particular dynamics of the time and blah 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 blah. Like, how do we? You really want to gamble on that scenario? That doesn't seem like such a great argument to me. That's like a single example, like in terms of like how do you have inductive proof? That's a single example. That's not nearly enough, right? And unlike I know debaters talk about war as being a risk, like or not being a risk but a certainty in debates. But honestly, when I judge, I don't think of it that way because that's not how the world works, right? I assume that most disads are probably not likely. The question is, what little likelihood do they have? If there was a crisis in India, Pakistan, well, there is one today, but if it was going to escalate, do I think it's going to lead to nuclear war? No, probably not. But I'm still concerned that it could. Does that make sense? And the fact that another one doesn't necessarily, it might reassure me a little bit, but it doesn't make me unconcerned. Does that make sense? And the Syria red lines question you have, I just think is like not it either, unless you have a lot more development.
What do you think about the credible commitment trap thing? First use is not credible now. So like
because of Syria?
No. They read the cards that's like first use is not credible in the status quo. I kind of leverage that to be like, so there's a commitment trap / miscalc stuff because no one takes this threat seriously.
I mean, I think that's kind of true. I think that's somewhat true.
One little question, not really related to content, but one last chance to kick Jack's ass a little bit in the 2NR. How do you feel about speed? Because a few of us sitting outside thought it was going a little too fast, but obviously we weren't flowing. So.
I wouldn't say like. It wasn't so much the speed, it was the way the speed was deployed. Like, there was irregularities between speed in cards and speed in tags. There was sloppy transitions in areas that made it a little difficult to flow. There are times where I think it's better to just go slower because I feel like, especially in debates where you're like really ahead and you don't need to go for... Like, even though there's a lot going on in this debate, to me, there's not a whole lot of arguments in terms of winning issues that need to be discussed at the end of this debate. And I feel like if you make a more decisive decision or have a more clear bifurcation of worlds, like conditionality means that we get like the world of the counterplan plus the status quo, and you do this setup work in the block. I feel like you don't have to do a lot of this, like, where you're, like, pressed to get through the ticky-tacky structure of the line-by-line. Like, more framing issues would probably ease up your burden to be so pressed where you can have a little bit of time to slow down and give, like, analysis because, like, obviously this debate's going to come down to, like, evidence comparison and argument comparison. So you want to have time to do that. Particularly in the block, but I didn't think like the overall speed was a problem. There were times where like you were unclear. Like I remember there was one time during the 2NC where I almost said clear because you just like stumbled through a tag and I like didn't get it. But yeah, that definitely would have. I probably would have taken off some speaker points for that.
my main concern is narrative coherence. This is like a big
Yeah.
deal to me, and like so in my judging philosophy, I call it explanatory burden and narrative coherence. Like to give you an example, once in a while I've gotten grumpy when a team has been like, they've conceded the link argument. Don't make me reinvent the wheel. Impact debate. And I've been like, you don't have a dissad at the end of the debate because you you refused to say what your argument even was. You were like, I refuse to even name it, right? And I was like, so you didn't get a dissad. Does that make sense? Like, sorry. And that was just all I mean to do. That's not what you did here, but in the sense that you have to pull it together. There has to be some coherence to it. Like all the parts, if they're conceded, then you only need to like state them. Right, you don't need to re-argue them or re-litigate. Does that make sense? But you still got to have it. And the biggest thing for me at the 2NR was that it just didn't have any narrative coherence. That's what I mean when I was like, I couldn't tell you what the 2NR was. Does that make sense? It was like some stuff. Yeah. So you have to like, what is the picture? If you put it together in an essay, would it make any sense? I don't think so. Does that make sense? I don't think it would. And that's more concerned less the speed than it was like. It also makes it very hard to flow or follow because like I'm trying to think and like there's like your brain there's just like missing gaps and you're like and so I know that there's times when I was just like where I think probably for me I'm probably gonna make a snort noise or like laugh a little bit when something gets skipped because the next argument I'm gonna be like okay I don't really know what happened but anyway I guess we're moving on. Guess we're keep going.
I mean, I was able to flow it fine, but I agree that there's not a coherent story throughout the debate on why to vote negative, and so you've just got bunches of pieces. And as they drop things, it gets harder to make a narrative because you're like, I have more stuff to go for than what I want, but you still need to select down what you go for. Right. And that could have started happening in the block, and that makes the 2NR easier, opposed to just sort of like
going for everything.
Yeah, and then not shutting the doors. And so a good 2AR would be able to beat that 2NR. Just because you left a bunch of open doors.
Makes sense.
I want to be clear. When I was talking, I wasn't talking about like overviews. I'm not talking about needing overviews. Yeah. Not talking about that. I'm talking about like you got to pull the piece together. Like I don't need anybody to. Most of the time, sometimes once in a while, but most of the time, I don't need anybody to be like to overview things. I just don't need that. I need it to be fit into the debate.
Yeah.